Bueno, antes de empezar, quiero decir algo en español, pero no sé qué. Entonces, Leonetta para siempre, no? Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin, welcome back to my channel. So this video is going to be a long one. I've been teasing it for a while, and that is because I feel like I've been working on it for an eternity. And first off, I have a couple disclaimers. The first being that despite the title and the majority of the content in this video, I do love this ship. I hate to say it, but you don't work on something for almost 5 months and not develop a liking to it. But that being said, that doesn't mean I'll be any less harsh on them. I think we all know how toxic these two are, even those of us that love them. But I just wanted to make it very clear that everything I'm about to say is coming from a place of love because I do love this ship and this show very much. The second being that I just don't have the time to add in my own subtitles to the clips I'm going to include in this video, so instead we're gonna have to use the dub titles from Disney+. I'm sorry if that upsets people, but I personally actually don't have a problem with the English dub. I feel like it's pretty decent. It's how I watched the show for the first time before I knew Spanish. But if I end up talking about something in this video that doesn't perfectly align with like what you read on screen, maybe take into account that I'm working more so off of the Spanish audio here. And lastly, I just wanted to emphasize that this video is about Violetta and Leon. Not Violetta and Tomas, not Lara and Leon, not Violetta and Diego, Violetta and Leon. And so this means that we're only going to be talking about those other ships when they become relevant to the main Leonetta storyline. But as always, if you would like to see me cover those other ships, please let me know in the comments down below because I would absolutely love to cover them in another video. But one last thing before we jump right into it, which is that this video is sponsored. And I honestly couldn't think of a better sponsor for this video other than BetterHelp. Because I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't imagine two characters that could have benefited more from therapy other than these two. And I feel like BetterHelp would have been a great fit for these guys because it's a therapy service that's offered completely online. And starting therapy can be hard. The right therapist for you might not be in your area, and some people find the face-to-face interaction of therapy to be uncomfortable. With BetterHelp, you can have your therapy sessions as a phone call, video chat, or even messaging if that's more your speed, which is great because it tailors towards your needs and whatever version of therapy is the best fit for you. This also means that you're able to schedule therapy sessions in a way that fits your schedule. And if the therapist that you're matched with at first doesn't seem like the right fit, you can switch to a new one at no additional cost, without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. And with 30,000 therapists in their network, it gives you a wide range of expertise to choose from. To get started, you fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you'll get matched with your therapist in most cases within 48 hours or less. Over 4 million people have used BetterHelp to start living a healthier, happier life, and people spend hours in the gym every week, so why not give your mind the same kind of attention? So if you think you could benefit from therapy, consider trying BetterHelp. You can click the link in the description or visit betterhelp.com/Caitlin McKillop. That's my name. But with all that being said, let's jump right into chapter 1. Okay, so first off, I have to set the scene a little bit. In the beginning of the show, Leon, our main character, is dating this other girl, Ludmilla, who is like our mean girl of the series. And Ludmilla has started to show interest in this delivery boy, Tomas, but to keep her deceit a secret from Leon, she's painted it as he is the one who's pursuing her, which in reality is not the case. And this is mainly due to the fact that he's actually interested in this other girl that he met in the first episode in The Rain, which is our main character, Violetta, and she also has feelings for him as well. Alright, are we all caught up? Great, let's do this. So Violetta and Leon's love story really begins in the 4th episode of the series. While out with his friend Andres, Leon sees Violetta and Tomas together and he assumes that she's his girlfriend. And the idea of this seems to spark something in Leon. So in the following episode, when he sees her almost get run over by some skateboarders, he jumps in to save her.
¿Estás bien?
Sí, estoy bien. Gracias.
Pero, ¿por qué esa cara?
Estoy bien.
Eres mala mintiendo. Además, una chava tan bonita como tú no tiene que estar triste.
Estoy bien, gracias.
Bueno, pero con cuidado. Me debes una.
Now, I think that there's two main takeaways from this initial meeting. The first being that he saved her because that goes on to become a thing between the two of them, and the second being that he can always tell when she's upset about something. And I know it is a little bit unrealistic that Leon is able to tell that something is upsetting her even though this is the very first time that he's ever met her, but at the end of the day, this series is still a novella after all. Back to episode 4, Leon reveals to Andres that he thinks that there's something special about Violetta, but that special thing is that he can use her to get revenge on Tomas. So this is when he comes up
up with the plan of trying to steal her away from him. And this is when I remind you all of the fact that he does all of this all while currently being in a relationship with someone else. But I guess to like play devil's advocate, maybe Leon doesn't see it as cheating when it's being done for revenge purposes. Who knows? In the next episode, the two go on to bump into each other the following day at the studio. This is when we find out that Leon's family knows Violetta's, as their fathers do business together, which I personally think is a cute fact about their relationship that doesn't get highlighted as much as it should. So Ramajo, who is her dad's assistant, asks Leon if he can look out for Violetta as she's going to be starting taking classes there. This brings Violetta to say that she can take care of herself, which causes Leon to retort that that wasn't the case yesterday.
Bueno, y ya que estás estudiando acá, espero que la cuides bien. ¿Sí?
Sé cuidarme sola, Ramayo.
Eso no parecía cuando te salvé en la calle.
Acá no corro peligro.
Bueno, un poco de ayuda no te hará daño.
Simpático, Leon.
I personally feel like this is a little bit of an underrated moment between the two of them. Like, I know it's short, but I feel like it demonstrates how much chemistry these two have even this early on in the series. And once again, it talks about him saving her. In episode 7, Leon decides that things are moving just a little bit too slowly for him, and so he decides to go right up to Violetta and ask her out for a smoothie. This doesn't end up going over as planned though, as Violetta says no, and then he decides to bring the smoothie to her instead, but then Ludmilla intervenes. And this is truly just the start of Ludmilla's antics as she continues to try her best to make sure Violetta's life is miserable as the show goes on, especially in the first and second seasons. Which I will say does make a little bit of sense when you look at things from her perspective, considering that the first introduction she had to her included both of the guys that she was interested in choosing her over herself. But that being said, it still does not excuse any of her terrible actions moving forward. Like, for example, what happens next when she tricks Violetta into thinking the studio's upcoming showcase is actually a costume party. This causes Violetta to show up dressed as an angel and everybody laughs at her. And even though both boys go after her, Leon is the one who tells her that she looks beautiful and defends her when the kids start laughing at her again.
No les hagas caso. Solo tienen envidia. ¿Sabes cuántas niñas darían todo por estar tan bonitas como tú? ¿Quieres que te acompañe en tu casa?
No quiero traerte problemas. No sé.
No es un problema. Permiso.
I really like this scene as well. I just personally feel like it would have been better if it didn't cut to Tomas's sad boy face every 5 seconds. But I feel like I can't blame them too much for that when it is pretty common knowledge now that Tomas was originally supposed to be the endgame of the series. Things were only reworked when they found out that he wouldn't be returning for the second season, which was honestly, in my opinion, just like a blessing in disguise because I personally couldn't imagine anyone else being with Violetta at the end of the series other than Leon. But back to this episode, Leon goes on to walk her home and helps her out when he realizes that she lied to her dad about going out. He also stands up for her at the studio the next day once people start making fun of her again, and I personally feel like that it's through this whole debacle that Leon comes to realize that he does have actual feelings for Violetta. Because you don't do all of this for somebody that you're only trying to get with for revenge, at least in my opinion. And we see this confirmed later on in the episode when he tells Andres that he can't get her out of his head and then goes on to break up with Ludmilla because of this. Then we have a bit of a lull in terms of things happening between the couple. It's not until episode 11 where Leon asks Violetta out for a smoothie for the second time that we see them again. Unfortunately for Leon though, this is when Violetta asks to just be friends, but this does still end up giving him some hope as he points out that she said for now, and so he says that he will keep trying.
Es más, te invito a un helado. Conozco un lugar frente al río que es muy rico.
Por el momento prefiero que seamos amigos. Yo vine acá a estudiar piano, no a buscar un novio.
Entiendo. Pero dijiste por el momento, así que voy a insistir después. Solo amigos.
Solo amigos.
Now, what I personally pictured when Leon said that he was going to try again later was that he was going to try again in a couple episodes' time, but apparently that was not the case, and he actually meant that he was going to try again the very next time that he sees her. So Leon catches her on her walk home that day, and he asks her out to dinner, but Violetta, of course, declines. In episode 13, he finds out that Violetta is auditioning for the studio, and he offers to help her. He offers again in the next episode and can also tell that something is up with her, and so he decides to bring her in for a hug.
Bueno, yo te puedo ayudar con los exámenes de ingreso si quieres.
No me arrepentí, no voy a dar el ingreso a León.
¿Por qué?
No sé, no me siento preparada.
¿Qué te pasa? ¿Por qué esa cara? No, ven. Tranquila.
Estoy bien.
And now I feel like I should highlight this as being their first hug on the series. It ends up becoming a thing that Leon's hugs are the one thing that's always able to calm Violetta down no matter what. And this is proven to be the case in the next episode when she confides in him in regards to some things that are happening with her dad, and he hugs her. But now it's time for Violetta to audition for the studio. So it's moments before her audition, and Leon takes this as an opportunity to cut in before Tomas to give her a pep talk and a kiss on the cheek for good luck. He takes this a step further after her audition when he interrupts her moment with Tomas and hits the flowers that he got her out of his hand, which causes them to get stepped on. Which I know was very mean of Leon to do, and he should not have done it, but I do find this to be a little bit of a funny moment. And then of course, to nobody's surprise, Violetta does go on to get into the studio and then gets paired up with Leon for their upcoming duet assignment. We then see them rehearsing together the following day, but Violetta is having a hard time singing with feeling with Leon as she doesn't actually feel anything for him. She tries again and is able to do fine, but that's only because she does it this time while picturing Tomas. Then we move on to their first private rehearsal together, where Leon can tell that she's only able to sing with feeling when she pictures Tomas. And so this brings him to make a move on her and grab her hand and tell her that he can help her forget about him. Violetta stops him because she doesn't want to lead him on and goes to leave, but this ends up causing Leon to reveal his feelings to her. He also says that he's not going to force things with her, and just getting her to see that Tomas is a bad person is good enough for him.
Leon, no puedo estar haciendo esto por una venida a casa.
No, espera. Siéntate. No te voy a negar que me gustas y que siento mil cosas por ti, pero si tú no sientes lo mismo, no te puedo obligar. Conmigo basta con que entiendas que Tomás es una mala persona, ¿sí?
Now, this moment in particular just really bothers me. And I know that this word is overused, but I feel like you could say that he is gaslighting her in regards to Tomas here. I mean, maybe you could argue that he does genuinely think that Tomas is a bad person, but from my perspective, I don't think he actually knows who Tomas is, like, at all. Really, he's just saying whatever he can to try to get Violetta all to himself, which just really bugs me. But apparently it works on Violetta, as we see in the next episode when he asks her out as friends and she agrees. And then this whole date as friends starts to seem a little bit more like a real date, if you ask me. Especially after she tells Tomas that it is a date once she sees him there with Ludmilla. And although I don't exactly agree with the way in which he was able to get her there, this date does end up being one of my personal favorite Leonetta moments from the first season. And this is because it's during this date that Leon decides to help her with her stage fright. He really wants to show her that it's because of the passion that she has for singing that helps her sing with feeling and not what she feels for Tomas. So he sets up a mic for her and tells her to sing with her eyes closed and back turned to the audience. She complies and is eventually able to get more comfortable and turn back towards the audience and actually perform. After their date, he walks her home and says that he wants to help her achieve all of her dreams and then leans in for a kiss, and then obviously she stops them and he apologizes. And then later he tells Tomas to back off because they're dating, which is not the case, and I don't know what provoked him to say that. Actually, I do know what provoked him to say that. Tomas provoked him to say that, but it's not true. But I felt like I should mention that because it's a claim that he made nonetheless. So the couple goes on to have 2 more rehearsals in which Violetta still struggles in singing with feeling with Leon. He tries to convince her some more that her talent has nothing to do with her feelings towards Tomas, but no matter how hard they try, nothing is able to help, which really is not good as their duet performance is right around the corner. But luckily for Leon, or as I should say, not so luckily for Leon, he ends up not actually having to perform. But this is due to Ludmilla accidentally triggering an allergic reaction out of him. And then to put the nail in the coffin, this leads to Violetta performing with Tomas instead. Obviously, when Leon finds out about this, he is not happy whatsoever, which causes him to repeat his whole singing with feeling speech. And at this point, I am just personally so done with this argument. Like, yes, I do understand the sentiment of it, but at the end of the day, I just can't get past the fact that he does have an ulterior motive here and the fact that he wants her to choose him over Tomas. And honestly, who cares if it's her feelings for Tomas that gets her to sing well? Like, everyone has their own coping mechanisms or like way to trigger their own emotions out of them, and honestly, it's not up to Leon to decide what that is for her. And I also just found this whole exchange in particular to come across as very condescending, especially when he says that he doesn't want to have to say that he told her so. So now we're at episode 25, which marks the first time in which Leon breaks into her house, which may sound dramatic for those of you who have not watched the series, but this is fairly commonplace for these two. They love not just going over to the other person's house, but showing up uninvited at their bedroom door.
A ver, ¿qué parte no entienden de déjenme en paz un segundo?
¿Así recibes a tus invitados? Te extrañaba.
So in typical Leon fashion, he can tell that she's upset about something and decides to take her out on a date. The two of them go to the restaurant, and then Leon finds out that she doesn't know how to ride a bike. And so this leads to a cute scene between the two of them where he teaches her how to, which is obviously another one of their season 1 highlights in my opinion. But any highlight when it comes to Leonetta has to be followed with a low light. So then we end this episode with Leon coming in right after Violetta agrees to a date with Tomas. Leon gets upset by this due to the fact that they had just spent the whole afternoon together. And honestly, I can see where Leon is coming from here, but at the same time, he's the one who decided to get involved with someone who clearly has feelings for someone else. And also, like, she doesn't owe him anything, and she's made it very clear as to how she feels about him this whole time. Surprisingly though, this does end up being the first time in which Violetta admits that she does feel something for Leon, but that it's different from Tomas and she doesn't understand it.
Pero por lo menos yo quiero tener las cosas claras, ¿no?
Con Tomás me pasan cosas, pero ya lo sabéis a eso, León.
¿Y conmigo?
Con vos también, pero cosas que no entiendo, que no deberían pasarme.
Está bien.
The following day, Leon asks if they can hang out later, but she says that she has her date with Tomas. This time he actually handles it surprisingly well and thanks her for being honest and says that he knows he'll be with her in the end. Which is a little bit of a cocky thing to say, but it is kind of funny considering that is how things turn out.
No te quiero mentir y tampoco que te enteres por ahí, pero tengo una cita con Tomás.
Gracias por la sinceridad. Pero no te preocupes, no me molesta. Porque al final sé que te vas a quedar conmigo. Que la pases bien.
Gracias.
In the next episode, we finally get to see them perform Voi por ti together, and it's during this performance that she's finally able to feel something when singing with him. Afterwards, Leon tells her that she can't deny now that she sang with him the same way she sings with Tomas, which is a little bit conflicting because I thought that his whole point was that it had nothing to do with the person she was singing with, but I guess now he's just using it as a tool to prove her feelings for him. And then all of this brings her to have a conversation with Fran about how she's confused, and then have a similar conversation with Angie about being in love with 2 boys. So now that I guess she has confirmed feelings for Leon, it's time for chapter 2. So the next day, Violetta calls Leon and Tomas interrupts this conversation, causing Leon to tell Violetta that she has to choose between the two of them. And I really like this moment because it's when Violetta finally turns Leon's words on him and says that he's right. If she feels something when they're singing, it's because of her and not who she's singing with. And then she goes on to say that she's not choosing either of them, so suck on that, Leon. Unfortunately though, this is when Leon then gets wrapped up in a Ludmilla scheme to try and tear Violetta and Tomas apart. After one of their classes, he gives her a sucker and then hugs her while Ludmilla films them in secret. But what Ludmilla doesn't know is that Leon has already started to change. So when Ludmilla shows him what she's filmed, his conscience kicks in and tries to get her to see that this is a bad idea, but unfortunately it's too late and she already uploads the video while he's talking. So now Tomas is just convinced that the two of them are together, and so when he sees them later that day, he asks Vilu if she's going to deny it now. And this irks Violetta to say no and that they are dating, which again, not true, and it kind of reminds me of earlier when Leon did the same thing to Tomas after he was provoked by him. We then see the two of them go to the Restro bar after class, and this is when Violetta confides in him about how she's lying to her dad about going to the studio. And I actually believe that he is the first person that she tells this secret to, and so I feel like that's gotta count for something. This is when things pick up again between her and Tomas as she's agreed to go on a date with him once again. Leon warns her that he's just gonna hurt her again, but she doesn't seem to care about this advice. And then technically, Leon does end up being right about this once word gets out about Tomas and his family having to move back to Spain. Obviously, Violetta is very upset by this, and so Leon once again takes this as an opportunity to comfort her. But then he goes on to say that he told her so, which doesn't really make much sense in my opinion. Like, yes, he has technically hurt her with this news, but this is something that is completely out of Tomas's control, and to blame him for his dad having to switch jobs is just like not fair at all. However, it is actually through all of this that Leon is finally able to have Violetta all to himself, or so he thinks. So we're at episode 34 now, and due to Tomas leaving, Violetta has finally been able to make a decision about the two of them. I don't think I would personally take this as that much of a win though, as it was a decision that was made by process of elimination. Nonetheless, she tells Leon that since Tomas is leaving, she doesn't want to be with him. Leon doesn't get too excited about this though, as he says that he's been here before, and so he wants her to prove her feelings for him. And so later that day, he basically makes her prove her feelings by taking her to a park and kissing her. And it's actually a pretty cute scene. He gets her to close her eyes and imagine the most beautiful place she can think of, and then he kisses her. Afterwards, she asks him why he did that, and he says that it's because they've done enough talking and it was time that they did something. Which I personally feel like is not the best response he could have come up with, and definitely not the most romantic response he could have come up with. I personally would have preferred something like, I don't know, like I've been wanting wanting to since the day we met and I just couldn't stop myself anymore or something. I don't know, make it cute and romantic instead of just being like, I don't know, I thought it was about time. Like, no, that's not a good reason. Like, instead, I just feel like it makes the whole thing fall a bit flat for me and kind of tarnishes their first kiss in a way. Especially when you think too much about it and wonder how consensual it actually was. Moving on, though, this does mark the start of their relationship, whether I like it or not. So that night, Leon sends flowers to her house, and this in turn ends up being one of the most iconic scenes from the series overall. This being due to the fact that it forces Violetta to have to tell her dad that they're dating, and he kind of freaks out about it.
Papá, ya sé que no te gusta mucho esto, pero en honor a la verdad vas a tener que ir acostumbrándote.
La nena.
¿Qué te pasa, mi amor? ¿Estás bien? ¿Tienes algún problema?
But if you were thinking that her making things official with Leon meant that she had finally forgotten about Tomas, you'd be sadly mistaken. Violetta quickly realizes that if it's his dad that's in the way, she can use her dad's privilege as leverage here. So she goes forward in asking her dad to hire Tomas's dad so that his family can stay in Buenos Aires. And this probably would have been what happened if Ludmilla didn't overhear this plan and get her dad to do it first. And although all of this didn't exactly go as planned, part of me does still feel like doing all of this for your ex that you still have feelings for while dating somebody else is at the very least questionable. But back to Leonetta, because we do have a few sweet moments coming up. A couple nights later, Leon comes over and finds out about the whole Angie debacle and plays along. He also ends up staying for dinner, and there's this funny comment that I like where Herman says that they don't have to hold hands to walk 5 feet towards the kitchen table. The next day at the studio, they share a moment where Violetta compliments his piano playing and he compliments her back.
Me encanta cómo tocas el piano, León.
Tú me encantas.
Me encanta también la letra.
La escribí para ti.
Bueno, será por eso entonces que me emociono cada vez que la escucho.
Solo cuando tú la cantas tiene sentido.
Some drama then happens with Jade, who is her father's fiance, once she catches her at the studio with Leon. He tries to cover for her, but it doesn't work, and she ends up blackmailing Violetta into telling her dad to marry her. And through all of this, Leon supports her and makes her feel better about the situation, which I just love. Then this brings us to the weird Band-Aid fiasco that I just feel like I have to talk about. Basically, Violetta shows up to their rehearsals, and while talking with Tomas, she gets a cut on her finger. And so he goes to get her a Band-Aid. While he's gone, Leon comes and also notices the cut on her finger, and so he too goes to get her a Band-Aid. Tomas comes back, she puts the Band-Aid on and then takes it off behind her back so that when Leon comes back, she can put his Band-Aid on her finger instead. And I just feel like I had to talk about this whole exchange because it wouldn't be happening if Violetta didn't still have feelings for Tomas. So it serves the purpose of reminding the audience that she is still conflicted between the two of them. This continues into the next episode when Tomas calls her and then Leon comes over and she lies to him about being on the phone with Tomas. And now the job stuff I can excuse, but this, not so much. I feel like this is definitely some deceitful behavior from Vilu, which really just isn't cool when she's supposed to be in a committed relationship with Leon. At the same time though, lying really isn't anything new to Violetta, so I really shouldn't be surprised by this. But this scene is also, interestingly enough, the first time in which Leon tells Violetta that he loves her. And not just te quiero, he says te amo, which for my Spanish speakers, you'll understand more so the significance of that. It is a little bit disappointing that she follows that up with the te quiero instead, but I honestly feel like she doesn't have any space in her heart for anything more than that, so at least she's being honest about something. I feel like I should mention that we are at episode 40 now, which means we have reached the midpoint of season 1. This also means that it's time for some more Tomas and Leon shenanigans. So Tomas shows up at her bedroom door because of course he does, and then Leon shows up as well, causing her to hide Tomas in her closet. Surprisingly enough though, she is actually somewhat honest with him. She tells him that Tomas was there earlier, but he says that he's not worried about it because he trusts her, although maybe he shouldn't. This brings us to the studio's performance, in which she tells Tomas that her heart is split in two and that she has feelings for the both of them. And so of course Leon overhears all of this and he is not impressed. So in the following episode he goes to Tomas and tells him to back off, which I personally find interesting because you'd think at this point you'd go to your two-timing girlfriend about this, but I digress. During all of this, Violetta writes a song about how she's caught between the two of them called Habla Si Puedes. The next day Leon finally confronts his girlfriend about what he heard and he asks her to make a decision between the two of them, and this time she says that she chooses him. But even though Violetta has now given Leon a clear answer, things then go on to get physical between the two guys anyways. Later on, Leon and Tomas get paired up for an assignment because of course they do, and as expected during their first rehearsal they go on to get into an argument which leads to Leon pushing Tomas to the ground. Violetta walks in on this and is upset, saying that violence isn't the way that you solve things, and Leon promises that it won't happen again. Switching gears a little bit though, now it is time for a new boy to come on the scene. scene. This is something that the first season loved to do, or I guess just show overall, because being stuck between two boys just clearly is not enough. Instead, they decide to just introduce character after character that are just smitten by Violetta. First up is Broadway. He comes to the studio and he's a dancer, and so then we get this great scene where he's trying to teach Violetta this new move, and then Leon enters and he gets quite possessive over this new guy trying to make a move on his girl.
Muy bien, ¿eh? Muy bien lo que están haciendo. Felicidades, muy bien. Muy bien.
Sí, está buena la coreo que hace Broadway.
Sí, Broadway la verdad es que es un buen aporte al estudio.
Gracias.
Va a estar bien trabajar juntos.
Now we have to jump a little bit backwards now as I remind you of the song that Violetta wrote earlier called Habla Si Puedes. While working with Leon, Violetta's friend Cami accidentally grabs that song from Violetta's bag instead of the one that was intended for her. And Leon immediately realizes that this song is about what Violetta is feeling. And this is almost the final straw for Leon, as he then goes on to ask Violetta for some time apart for her to clear her head. But as reasonable as his request might be, Violetta is still able to talk him out of this by saying that the song talks about her doubts and not what she's sure about, which is apparently him.
Si no me querés creer y no querés estar conmigo, yo lo acepto.
Yo lo digo porque la letra dice muchas cosas.
La letra habla de mis dudas, no de mis certezas. Y de lo único que estoy segura ahora es que quiero estar con vos.
The song drama continues as, like I mentioned earlier, Tomas and Leon are also paired up for this assignment. So Tomas writes a song for Leon that is actually quite funny called Verte de Lejos. The song is basically about how sad he is having to watch the girl that he likes, Violetta, be with somebody else, Leon, and so obviously Leon gets very upset by this. He does still go on to perform it though, as he doesn't really have a say in the matter, and during his performance, Violetta imagines Tomas being the one singing it to her, which makes sense as it is his words. But I will say that I just find this whole thing a little bit tiring at this point. It's clear to me that Tomas is the actual person that she wants to be with here, so I feel like she should just save everyone the trouble and just move on to him already. Which I guess she does kind of do next. So on to episode 47, which is where we have Fran's costume party. Violetta and Leon go dressed as a princess and a knight, and Ludmilla and Tomas go dressed as pirates. And although she starts off by telling Leon that she needs to forget about the people that upset her and move on, she ends up doing the exact opposite. While everybody's dancing, she sees what she thinks is Ludmilla kissing Tomas. She later says that she was upset by this as it proves that Tomas was lying and that he is actually the type of person that would go after Ludmilla. And while I'm sure that that is probably part of the issue, I think we all know that the bigger one is that she has feelings for him, and so this upset her. So this motivates Violetta to go to the studio, steal Ludmilla's costume, go back to the party dressed as Ludmilla, and try to kiss Tomas. All to prove a point. And just to clarify, Tomas can tell it is her, which is why he goes forward with almost kissing her before she stops them. After the party, she lies to Leon about where she went, but in typical Violetta fashion, of course, this almost kiss was filmed. So Ludmilla shows the video to Leon and he ultimately breaks up with her.
Lo hice porque no soportaba más que siguiera buscándome cuando en realidad estaba enamorada de Ludmilla.
Violeta, basta. A mí no me interesa por qué lo hayas hecho. Está mal. Si querías besarlo, está muy mal. Si querías demostrar no sé qué cosa, está peor.
Pero, Leon...
No, Violeta, no digas nada. Yo no puedo seguir así. Con eso termino.
Now, if it wasn't clear already, I am definitely on Leon's side in terms of this breakup. Violetta is just way too deep into this, and it's like no matter what excuse she could have given to him, what she did at the end of the day was wrong. And overall, I am just glad that Leon finally said enough. And as much as I do love these two, I can't deny the fact that if this actually would have been the end of them, it probably would have saved Leon a lot of heartache in the grand scheme of things. And Violetta as well. So Violetta, post first breakup with Leon, is not doing too well. Leon, on the other hand, is just trying to keep his distance and move on. That is, until he thinks that Violetta is moving on right to Tomas. And this is all thanks to another one of Ludmilla's schemes. So she makes a fake note from Leon to Violetta and plants it in her locker, asking to meet. Then she gives a fake note from Violetta to Tomas asking the same thing. Then to top the whole plan off, she then tells Leon that Violetta and Tomas have agreed to meet, and so he shows up as well. Violetta and Tomas arrive first, causing Leon to believe Ludmilla's lies, and he gets upset with her. She tries to explain that she received a note from him, but it doesn't go over well as she no longer has the note. Later, she then comes up to him and randomly tries to kiss him. I'm not really too sure what that was about, but then she tries to reconcile and he stands his ground.
A mí también me duele mucho todo lo que está pasando.
¿De verdad?
Sí, te pido perdón por haberme acercado a la fiesta, Tomás, pero entre él y yo no pasó nada. Créeme, no puedo verte sufrir por algo que no existió.
¿Y la cita de hoy qué?
La cita de hoy. No sé qué hacer para que me crea. Yo no lo cité a Tomás, en serio.
They then go on to have basically the exact same conversation in the next episode, which I won't harp on. But Violetta does say this time that if things were the way that Leon says that they were, then she'd constantly be around Tomás, which I just found to be a bit of an ironic and unaware comment from Violetta, because that's exactly how things are. Now, although Violetta has done absolutely nothing to prove that she has changed her ways, that apparently doesn't mean anything, as it's time for the two of them to get back together. So in episode 52, Violetta writes an email to Leon about how much she loves and misses him, and then sends it on accident. Surprisingly, though, this works for Leon. Her words were just so convincing that the next day he tells her that he feels the same way, and the two of them get back together. So just as an observation, I would say that a breakup that was over something as big as her trying to kiss another guy, that time apart really did not last long at all. Also, I just wanted to add that Leon apologizes here, and I'm not really too sure why. In my opinion, he didn't do anything wrong and had every right to be upset with her. I also think it would have been nice if Leon could have taken a page from his own book here and said something again like he'd believe it when he sees it. Because otherwise, they're just going to end up in the same Tomás cycle once again, which is exactly what goes on to happen. The very next day, Leon sees Violetta go to talk to Tomás and gets upset with her. And then Violetta and Tomás get trapped in the storage closet together, and again, Leon gets upset with her. But that night, he goes to her house to talk things over, and they're actually able to come to an agreement. And this is mainly done through Violetta explaining that she only sees Tomás as a friend.
Leon, no puedo olvidarme de Tomás, lo veo todos los días. Pero yo ya aclaré las cosas con él y hicimos un trato. Vamos a ser amigos y solamente amigos porque no queríamos estar juntos. Por favor, Leon, necesito que me creas. Yo estoy con vos. Y Tomás es solamente mi amigo.
Ok, te entiendo.
Now, this would all be fine and dandy if the exact same conflict didn't go on to happen in the very next episode. I also feel like I should mention that this is when Fede shows up, because he becomes relevant in it. Back to Tomás. So Leon walks in on the two of them sharing a moment, and guess what happens? That's right, he gets upset. This time, however, Violetta then ends up getting upset with him for not trusting her. But then this conversation doesn't end up going anywhere because Fede interrupts it. But let's talk about Fede, shall we? So he's this kid whose parents are friends with Germán's, and so he's going to be staying with them while he's visiting, and he's also going to be attending the studio. This concerns Leon because he doesn't know how trustworthy he is in regards to keeping Violetta's studio secret a secret. And also because he's threatened by any guy's presence around his girlfriend. And so he tells Fede to just listen to her sing and then he'll understand. And then he tells her that after that's done, he needs to stay away from her. So Fede goes on to do this and then agrees to keep her secret. So now we're nearing the end of the season and things are finally starting to get exciting. Umix is now on the scene, which is this entertainment company that partners with the studio to create this reality show singing competition. Violetta freaks out about this and the idea of being filmed for her dad to see, but Leon comforts her and is able to give her the advice to just not enter the competition. But then of course Ludmilla gets under her skin and then she goes on to enter anyways. In the next episode, she regrets this decision and goes to withdraw, but then Leon gives her some advice once again. He tells her to just stick it out and then tell her dad if she wins, which she agrees to do until Fede gives his opinion. And then Leon gets upset with her for choosing this random guy's advice over his.
Hace 3 minutos hablamos y quedamos que te ibas a quedar en el reality. ¿Qué pasó?
Bueno, León, pero lo pensé mucho, hablé con Federico y...
¿Y él por qué se mete?
Solo di mi opinión.
¿Y quién te preguntó?
Me sirvió la opinión.
¿Te sirve más la opinión de alguien que no conoces que la mía?
Nunca dije eso. No me gusta la manera en que me estás hablando, León.
Estoy hablando así porque no te entiendo.
Yo no te entiendo y no entiendo por qué tanto enojo.
¿Sabes? Lo que más me molesta es que tú tomas decisiones y no me dices nada a mí. Y por más que tal vez no pueda estar de acuerdo, pero te voy a apoyar. Tú lo sabes.
Now, I understand Leon being upset by this, but at the same time, Fede's opinion was her opinion at the beginning of this episode as well. So I don't think it is really a case of her choosing one guy's opinion over the others, but more so just going back on what they discussed. But then Fede complicates things further when at the end of the episode, he tries to kiss her. So now Violetta has a lot on her plate, and since Leon is already upset with her over what happened earlier, she decides not to tell him about this. The two go on to have a conversation and make up, but of course no secret can be kept long on the show unless it's family related apparently, and so Ludmilla tells Leon about the almost kiss, and so he goes over to her house to confront them. He talks with Fede first, who takes all of the blame and apologizes to the both of them before leaving them alone to talk. Violetta explains she didn't want to make things worse, and Leon apologizes for bothering her over nothing. Although I personally don't really think that that is nothing. I think that if someone tried to kiss me, you better believe my boyfriend would be hearing about it. Then I guess the show writers were just like, you know what? That kissing plotline was so good, but you know what would make it even better? If it was with someone she actually did have feelings for, like, I don't know, Tomas, for example. So in episode 61, Umix films Tomas comforting Violetta, and the two of them almost kiss. Then right after this exchange, she goes outside and is all giddy to see Leon, and they hug. Which I guess would be a normal exchange for two people in a relationship with one another if one of them literally wasn't just moments away from kissing another dude. Like, I just don't understand how she could seemingly feel no remorse in regards to what just happened.
Pero no teníamos que ensayar la coreografía hoy.
Cierto, entremos.
No, espera. No me das uno de esos abrazos que tanto me gustan.
No, te voy a dar dos.
On the other side of things, though, this could have also been them wanting to give us just like a little bit more of like a cute moment between the two of them before they teared them away from us once again. So later, Leon is, of course, shown the video of her and Tomas, and he breaks up with her once again. At first, she tries to deny what happened and says that she can explain everything, but then she actually ends up taking responsibility for her actions and says that their breakup is for the best.
Tienes razón, y los sueños no son como yo quiero, son más complicados.
Nosotros lo complicamos.
No, nosotros no las complicamos. Yo las complico, León. Y no lo tengo que hacer más. Por ahí tienes razón, y lo mejor va a ser que nos separemos.
And this is one of those moments where I wish I could just play the whole scene for you guys because it is just so great and so chaotic. Tomas comes in at first, and then Ludmilla as well, who just like screams for a bit, and it's just great, and I love it. But now that the couple are once again broken up, it's time to move on to our last chapter of season 1, chapter 4. So to summarize what's going on in our non-romantic plot, basically Violetta gets unfairly voted out of the singing competition due to some Ludmilla antics. This causes Leon to take a stand and call for a revote. Then once that request is not granted, he drops out of the competition altogether. And since Violetta was the runner-up, she would be the one to take his place. So Violetta finds out about this, and instead of being happy to be back in the competition, she is upset. She calls him and tells him that she didn't like how he went forward with this without talking to her about it first, but she also conveys what upset her about this the most, which is the fact that him doing this for her while they're no longer together makes her want to be with him again, even though she knows that she can't be.
Sabes lo que siento por vos y lo que me cuesta sostener que no volvamos para no lastimarnos. Y ahora te sacrificas así por mí. Yo quiero correr y abrazarte por hacer algo tan enorme, León. Pero ¿sabes qué? Es lo peor que podría hacer, porque no quiero seguir lastimándote ni haciéndote sufrir.
Bueno, si quieres, imagínate que no lo hice por ti, que lo hice por mí y que no soportaba que injustamente hayas quedado fuera.
Now, I get that this isn't exactly fair to Violetta, and it puts her in a tough spot, especially because feelings are involved on both ends. But this is one of the things that I love so much about Leon. It's the fact that no matter what state his relationship with Violetta is in, he will always make that sacrifice for her time and time again. He always puts her above himself, which I personally feel like is like one of the main appeals of this ship. So obviously Violetta does take his spot in the competition, and then a couple episodes later, we have this really cute moment where he comes to wish her luck before her performance, and they hug.
Si un abrazo es lo mínimo que puedo hacer para que brilles como brillas siempre y seas feliz, es lo menos que puedo hacer.
Qué bobo sos.
Gracias.
But then later that day, Ludmilla tricks Leon into saying a bunch of mean stuff about Violetta. Of course, she overhears all of this stuff that he doesn't mean and then leaves before he finishes his sentence.
A ver, Ludmilla, si yo dije que Violeta es una agrandada y que no la soportaba y que es una engreída, egoísta, aprovechada, bajo ese disfraz de niña buena que tenía engañando a todos los demás, lo que tú quieras, que es pura imaginación tuya, la habría juzgado sin haberla conocido, la habría juzgado muy mal. Y hubiera sido un tonto.
Más de lo que vos pensás.
Then when Leon calls her that night, she gets mad at him, saying that she wants nothing to do with him. She then tells him what she overheard, but doesn't give him the chance to explain. And then what bothers me the most about this conflict is the fact that it doesn't even end up getting resolved. We just have this one scene with Leon where he tells Maxie that he changed because of his love for Vilu, which I can only imagine he was able to communicate that back to her. On to episode 70, where we see both of them talking to their groups of friends about how sad they are not being with the other person anymore. This leads to their friend groups talking to one another, causing them to tell Leon that Violetta wants to to get back together. But then when Violetta ignores him at the studio, this causes Leon to believe that what his friend said wasn't true. When in reality, Violetta had actually just found out in a very unkind way that Angie is actually her aunt. So she had a lot going on in that moment that actually had nothing to do with Leon. Moving on, the two then experience some dream telepathy as they both dream of the same song, Podemos. Their dream comes to life the next day as Leon plays a song on the piano and Violetta recognizes it and goes to sing with him. Violetta immediately thinks that this is a sign, but unfortunately Leon just isn't as convinced. A couple episodes later, Violetta asks to be friends, but he says that he can't because it's just too hard for him. And then, interestingly enough, this is actually what brings Violetta to say te amo for the first time.
Leon, no me puedes estar diciendo esto. Yo te extraño y te necesito mucho, por favor. Yo te amo.
Tú no sabes lo que quieres. Y no es algo nuevo, ha sido así desde el principio. El problema es que ahora ni siquiera lo quieres aceptar.
I actually really feel for the both of them in this scene, Leon standing his ground and knowing what's best for him even though it hurts. And then Vilu going through what she's going through and just begging him to be her friend is just almost heartbreaking to watch. But if I had to pick a side, I do think I am with Leon on this one. I personally just get how important it is for me to completely cut off contact after a breakup, and I am very lucky that I have never dated someone like Violetta who makes that task next to impossible. But at the same time, Leon isn't exactly innocent in that regard either. In the next episode, we see Leon eavesdropping on a conversation between Violetta and Tomas where she is begging him to stop pursuing her. This ends up being enough for Leon to think that she's over Tomas and want her back. So at the end of the episode, he interrupts Tomas, asking her for another chance to say that that's not going to happen because they're getting back together. Violetta is not happy with this, which confuses Leon because literally a day ago she told him that she loved him, but she goes on to explain that she doesn't want him making decisions for her. Now this is when the show decides to go full-on love triangle mode, which I guess is kind of what we've been doing this entire season, but now it's like really like game on. We've got 4 episodes left, and so now it's truly time to fight over Vilu. First off, we have this great scene where they both show up at Violetta's house and try serenading her from her window. Obviously, her dad is not impressed by this whatsoever, which makes the whole scene even better, and he ends up kicking them out.
Muy lindo todo, en serio, muchísimas gracias.
Hablemos de una vez, siempre cerca tuyo estaré, aunque no.
¿Qué están haciendo acá? ¿Se puede saber?
¡Para, papá, para, por favor!
Móvete, adentro, Violetta, adentro, cierra la ventana. Vamos.
Hablemos.
Papá, por favor, para.
Inmediatamente, se van. Vamos, toma.
Then they go on to fight over her at the studio, and she has to break it up, saying that she doesn't want to be with either of them. Leon shows up at her house that night to leave her a letter, but she sees him there, and so she goes to talk to him. He says that no matter what, he'll always be waiting for her, and then he kisses her on the cheek goodbye. And so this brings us to the finale. So Herman has finally found out that Violetta is enrolled in the studio, and this brings them to the conclusion that they need to move. This leads to Leon and Tomas both showing up at her house to beg him to change his mind, but it doesn't work. And this brings us to basically their last scene of the season, where we have Violetta saying goodbye to the both of them. Leon asks her if she's made up her mind in regards to the two of them, and she goes on to have this big speech about how they're still young and still have so much to learn.
No, Tomás, yo a vos te quiero mucho. Y a vos también, Leon. De maneras distintas, pero los quiero mucho a los dos. Y creo que somos muy chicos y nos estamos tomando esto como si fuese el fin del mundo, y no. Nos queda una vida por delante. ¿Sí? Y esto se trata de aprender, de crecer y de vivir.
Te voy a echar de menos. Vas a ser feliz, lo sé. Cuídate mucho.
And like, yeah, I know that's a bit of a lackluster ending, but that's pretty much it for season 1. We do get this one moment at the show between her and Tomas where he says that he's going back to Spain and they say their goodbyes. But as far as Violetta and Leon go, that basically wraps things up for them, which I just feel like is further proof that they weren't the initial intended endgame of the series, but then had to pivot after Tomas left. And like I said earlier, I am very thankful for that because I personally just don't know what the show would have looked like with Violetta and Tomas as the endgame. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about them where I just like, I can't root for them. It's just like they're missing something. I don't know what it is, but they're missing it. Maybe it's that fire that Leon and Violetta have. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But now that we've finished season 1, we can get to when the real drama kicks in with season 2. And like, as much as I love the antics of season 1, like it will always hold a very special place in my heart. Like I feel like this is when the show gets good in my opinion. And so I'm so excited to talk about it.
before we jump into season 2, I do have to give a little bit of a trigger warning as this second season introduces this new character of Diego. This character in the beginning of the season exhibits behaviors of harassment and sexual assault. And obviously this is still a Disney Channel series, and so these behaviors are still very surface level. And this video isn't about him, and so I won't be going into depth, but I still wanted to be clear that when I talk about his actions, I'm going to be talking about them for what they are. There's going to be absolutely no sugarcoating from me. And I don't want to scare anybody, it's really nothing that intense, and like I said, this is still a Disney Channel series, and so you can kind of use your best judgment here. But if any of these topics are triggering for you, maybe skip ahead to like mid-chapter 7, I would say. So we start off season 2 with an 80s themed party hosted by Umix. Leon has decided not to go to this party because of Violetta and the fact that he can't stop thinking about her. But he says that she was very clear about not wanting to choose him or Tomas, and so he really wants to respect her decision here. Leon also has a new hobby, which is motocross, and so we can expect a lot more of that moving forward. Meanwhile, Violetta, along with the rest of their friends, have found out that Leon has decided not to go to this party, and so they decide to go to the racetrack to try to convince him otherwise. But once they get there, they quickly come to the realization that this racetrack is a very loud environment, and they're not going to be able to talk to him from where they are. And so this leads to Violetta dressing up as one of the motocross employees so that she can get closer to him to talk. But of course, this backfires with her accidentally falling onto the track, and Leon has to save her. So it's nice to see them keep the tradition alive of him saving her during every season's first encounter. Then we get to the party where, surprise, Leon does come, because of course he does, and then we get this fun romantic slow-mo shot between the two of them after they see each other for the first time. The couple then goes on to meet on the stairs at this party, and they have this like Cinderella moment where they just throw her shoe around for a little bit. Like literally she trips and it falls off, and then he goes to pick it up and then ends up dropping it further down the stairs. And this is when we are introduced to the one and only Diego. He picks up the shoe at the same time as Leon, and that is when we are left on a cliffhanger. In episode 2, the boys go on to fight over Violetta's shoe, and then she ends up laughing at one of Diego's jokes that he makes about Leon's wig, causing him to leave offended. The following day at the studio, Vilu goes to talk to Leon, but he is not having it. She clearly wants to get back together with him, but he is still upset over what happened at the party. However, at the end of the episode, Leon seems to have a change of heart. He sees her singing Podemos at the karaoke bar, and so he goes up to sing with her. And this could have possibly have been hinting at what happens at the end of the season. Afterwards, they go on to talk, but then get interrupted by Diego dedicating Voi por ti to Violetta. This causes Leon to get upset, thinking that she went to the karaoke bar to meet with him, and so he leaves. So we've had a total of 2 interactions with this man that neither of them know, and yet Leon is already throwing a fit. Which, like, I understand he probably has some Tomas PTSD after the events of the previous season, but like at the same time I do feel like he is being pretty unreasonable here. And then later on, Fran is actually the one that's able to get through to him. She tells Leon that Violetta did not go to the karaoke bar to meet with Diego, obviously, and this causes him to admit that he does still have feelings for her and he wants her back. But at the end of the day, this series is still a novella, and so this does not work out as one would hope. Leon calls Violetta and asks her to come to the track so they can talk and then go out for a smoothie afterwards. Their time for their date arrives, Leon gets her flowers and calls her, but Vilu has since been grounded and her phone confiscated. She later tries to call him and go to him after she's allowed, but then Diego shows up at her house to harass her some more. Then the following night, Leon comes over and they're finally able to talk. Violetta says that she has no idea who Diego is and that there's nothing going on between the two of them. But she also says that she needs some time alone to figure out what she wants, and he agrees. This whole conversation is pointless though, because the next day she tells Fran that she's decided that she wants to get back together with him. So Violetta goes to the track after class and meets Alara, Leon's mechanic, who we'll see more of later. And then Diego shows up, which causes Leon to get in a motocross accident just from seeing the two of them together. Don't worry about Leon though, he's fine and more worried about Diego's presence than any injuries that could have been caused from his accident. So he goes over to Vilu asking why she brought him there, but she says that she didn't because why on earth would she do that? It just makes no sense, Leon. Use your brain for a second. Anyways, all of this brings Violetta to call Leon later to talk about their relationship, and he says that he wants to just be friends.
Y creo que lo mejor es que seamos amigos.
¿Amigos?
Sí, no quiero que pase lo mismo del año pasado. Sí, solo amigos. Como antes.
Está bien, sí. Si es lo que vos querés, está bien.
A couple episodes later, Leon finds out that her mom's diary is missing, and so he goes to check on her. She asks for one of his hugs to make her feel better, but then stops herself when she remembers that they're just friends. He then reads one of the lyrics for the song that she's composing and compliments it, unaware that it was written by Diego. Moving on to the following episode, Violetta asks Leon out to the movies as friends, and he agrees. But of course, this doesn't end up going as planned either. After class, her dad answers her phone, and so he tells Herman to tell Violetta that his doctor appointment went long, and so he needs her to come to his house instead of him coming to her. Of course, Herman does not pass along this message, causing Violetta to miss out on their date. So this is now the second time in the season so far in which these two have tried to meet up and it just hasn't worked out. And I should mention that her and Leon do talk about this the next day, and he is very understanding about the whole situation. Now remember earlier when Leon complimented the lyrics that weren't hers? So in episode 8, Cami accidentally tells Leon that Diego has been writing lyrics for her, which causes him to make that connection. He goes to Violetta and she apologizes for lying about it, but when she is asked why she lied if she doesn't have feelings for him, she's not able to come up with an answer.
Tú lo sabes mejor que nadie. Las mentiras solo traen problemas.
Es que tenía miedo, León. Tenía miedo de decirte que la frase era de Diego. Tenía miedo de perderte. Por algo que la verdad es que no significa nada para mí.
Si no significa nada, ¿por qué mentiste?
Now, I personally feel like I have the answer that Leon is looking for here, and no, it's nothing to do with Violetta having any sort of feelings for this guy that she doesn't even know. It is more so the fact that every time Diego has been brought up, Leon gets mad at her, which is the same thing we see in the following episode when Diego shows up at the studio to watch Violetta sing and Leon gets mad. And this leads to Violetta having to come over and basically hold Leon back from getting into a physical fight with Diego. Then we see her that night send his call to voicemail because she's unhappy with how he handled things earlier. And this is basically a repeat plot from season 1 where she walked in on him pushing Tomas to the ground. So I do like that Violetta is consistent here with her no violence policy. But this call from Leon that she sent to voicemail was actually a little bit of an important one, as it was to warn her about Ludmilla changing a party's address to her house. So when she doesn't answer, he goes to her, but then of course he sees Diego there. This causes him to jump to conclusions once again and assume that she didn't answer her phone because she was with him, and so he leaves. The next day at the studio, she talks to him and finally says that she is done with him jumping to conclusions about Diego, which I just love to see, because honestly, Violetta has done absolutely nothing to show that she has any sort of feelings for Diego. I guess besides using one of his lyrics and not telling him, but I honestly don't think that that justifies any of Leon's actions here. Like, I know that the Tomas situation is still quite fresh for him, but at the same time, it's just so frustrating for him not to be able to see that all of this is due to Diego being incredibly overbearing. He even goes on to tell Cami that the only reason why Diego is getting close to her is because she lets him, which is something that personally really upset me because that is just like textbook victim blaming. This guy has been like stalking and harassing her for the past 11 episodes, saying that she is letting him get close to her is absolute garbage. But it's time to get back on this roller coaster once again, because in the following episode, Leon finds out that Violetta's dad has been arrested. And so he goes over to check on her, and the two end up hugging and almost kissing until Olga interrupts.
No entiendo por qué Angie no me llama, Ramallo tampoco tiene novedades, y yo... No es que estoy nerviosa, lo que pasa es que necesito saber...
Paciencia. Deben estar haciendo trámites o algo. Tranquila.
Gracias por estar acá.
Bueno, como diría Ramallo, espacio personal.
And then I guess the tragedy of her father's arrest does have an underlying bright side in the fact that it's what brings these two back together. Like, all Leon has done since this season has started is yell at her over Diego, but then once her dad gets arrested, he's suddenly like awoken and ready to get back together. But I guess if you do really look at the grand scheme of things, that is pretty consistent with his character. Whenever Vilu is in trouble, he is there for her. This time I guess it just took her dad getting arrested. So the next day at the studio, Violetta comes in while he's composing and she asks if he wants to get back together, and he says yes. It's that simple.
Y entonces, León, ¿qué nos pasa? Esta distancia no tiene nada que ver con lo que sentimos. Y si nos separa, tiene que estar mal. ¿Quieres volver a estar conmigo?
Sí quiero.
Ay, te extrañé tanto. Ay.
I also feel like it's worth noting that this is the first time that they say that nobody is going to separate them. This goes on to become their catchphrase basically, where they make this promise every single time they get back together, and it holds no actual weight whatsoever as someone always ends up tearing them apart. And I just had to mention that I find this whole situation kind of funny. Like, we've been playing this game of will they won't they for the past like 12 episodes, and then now that it's finally happened, it just seems too easy. But at the same time, I guess that makes sense considering their relationship is only going to last for about 9 episodes this time. So we start off episode 13 with Leon saying that it's time they take their relationship to the next level, which is quite the phrase to say on a Disney Channel series with the majority of their audience being children. But then he goes on to say that they have to forget about Diego and anything else that gets in their way. And then we have, and I'm not saying this lightly, one of my absolute favorite scenes in this entire series. That night, Violetta has a dream about both boys breaking into her bedroom and fighting over her. It's a wonderful scene, even better with the English dub in my opinion, and I just wish I could play it for you all. Later, Diego stirs up some trouble once again when he texts Violetta asking her to call him right when he sees Leon approaching. So she does this and he shows it to Leon as proof that she likes him, I guess. And so in response, Leon snatches the phone from him and answers it. Violetta explains what happened and he surprisingly remains calm and says that they'll talk about it later, which they do, and again, it's very calm and civil, and so it seems like Leon really meant what he said about nothing getting between them. That night, Leon shows up in her room and they talk about what's going on at the studio and how she's worried about her dad. And then they go on to have this really sweet moment where they almost kiss, but then her dad interrupts them.
Va a salir bien, vas a ver. Además, tú confía en mí. No estás sola. Juntos podemos hacer y pasar por lo que sea.
Gracias. Me hace bien sentir eso.
Moving on to the next episode, Diego gets into the studio, which pisses Leon off, and then Violetta does the classic, like, pick-me-girl thing that everybody makes fun of, where she, like, steps in between them and is like, no, Leon, don't do this, don't listen to him, and it's just, like, so good. I love it. After class, Leon decides that it's time for them to have a romantic moment since things have been going so well. So he meets up with her as she's walking home on his motorcycle that I guess he owns now. Like, I feel like that was supposed to be his motocross bike, but that is clearly not a motocross bike. That is a straight-up motorcycle, which has me slightly concerned because I don't know if he's old enough or qualified to even drive one. Anyways, we're moving on from the bike, and so Leon says that all they've done so far is argue, and so he wants to do something for them. He brings her to this bench that overlooks the water and says that he found this place last year and has been coming there ever since on his own to think. It's a very special place to him, and she's the only person he's ever brought there, so the classic rom-com trope. Then this is followed by an almost unsettling moment where the flower petals from the tree start falling around them and it's all glowy and up close. They lean in for a kiss, but then of course that's when her phone rings, cutting off their romantic moment. Now to again quickly summarize the non-romantic plot that is currently going on the show. Jade, Herman's ex-fiance, has conducted a plan to steal all of his money and she has succeeded, and so now they are broke. And remember last season when Tomas hid in Violetta's closet when Leon came over? Yeah, get ready for part 2 of that. So everybody's been coming over to check on Violetta due to what she's going through and the fact that they're also about to lose their house. So Diego shows up and goes to her room while Violetta is in the kitchen. Her friends are there, and so Fran goes downstairs to tell Vilu, but then she sees that Leon has arrived. This leads to her going back upstairs and the two of them deciding to hide Diego in her closet.
¿Y Vilu? ¿Encontraste lo que estás buscando? ¿Cómo está, Francesca? ¿No querés que te ayudemos? Chica, yo no voy a seguir con esto. Salí de acá, salí. ¿De qué te reís?
Situación.
Ok, él entró así de repente y nosotros no sabíamos...
Sí, y pensamos que te ibas a poner mal, le quisimos decir la verdad por eso y...
A ver. Violetta no sabía nada, ¿no?
A ver.
Now, I feel like this scene is a perfect example of Violetta's growth from season 1 to season 2. I feel like last season Violetta would have immediately gone along with the lie. Although, to be fair, she doesn't have any feelings for the guy hiding in her closet this time around. And I also just like how understanding Leon is in regards to this whole situation, because I feel like earlier on in the season he probably wouldn't have been.
But now it's time for things to start to go downhill once again. Violetta and Diego then get paired up for an upcoming performance, and she is upset by this, mainly due to the fact that their performance ends in a kiss. Leon goes on to comfort her, which I love to see, and he advises her to just try and keep things professional. But that's easier said than done when you're dealing with somebody like Diego. And we see this when he tries to kiss her during their rehearsal and films it. After this, Violetta goes to her friends to talk about this almost kiss when Leon interrupts, and she immediately tells him what happened, which again I feel like is proof of her character growth. And although Leon is slightly ticked off by this news, he doesn't make it a problem as she says that they didn't actually kiss, which I personally don't like. The problem shouldn't be whether or not they kiss, the problem should be Diego forcing himself on her. So even if they did kiss, he should be mad at Diego and not her, which is the exact conflict that we'll get to in a little bit. But first, we are still focusing on this hypothetical rehearsal kiss. So Andres gets into Leon's head about her having feelings for Diego even though she doesn't. Fran then finds out that Diego filmed their rehearsal, and then due to the angle that the camera was at, it makes it look like they did kiss. Andres then steals Fran's camera and shows this footage to Leon. Also, amongst all of this, Herman finds out that Violetta has to kiss Diego in this upcoming show, and he is not happy about it. So then we see Violetta and Diego having a rehearsal on stage when her dad storms in upset, and they decide to change the kiss from a real kiss to a stage kiss. Now, Violetta hasn't seen Leon since he saw the video, so she goes to him upset about
about the fact that her dad just embarrassed her in front of everyone. But he does not offer her any comfort whatsoever and instead gets mad at her for kissing Diego, which she did not do.
Leo, no sabes el momento horrible que me hizo pasar mi papá. Me sacó del ensayo como si tuviese 5 años, me avergonzó enfrente de todos. Igual, puedo hablar con Pablo y van a trocar el beso, así que no me voy a tener que besar con Diego.
¿Y cuál sería el problema?
No entiendo.
Sí. ¿Por qué te molestaría tanto si ya lo besaste una vez?
¿Cómo?
So I understand that Leon, like I've said numerous times already, has been here before. He's used to Violetta running off with Tomas and deceiving him. But it's just so frustrating because this is really not the same thing. And then to go on and shame Violetta and be like, what's the problem when you already kissed him? Like, it just pisses me off. Anyways, they go on to argue over whether or not Violetta did kiss him, and then the conversation ends with Violetta hugging him to calm him down. And then to just make matters worse, Diego goes on to lie to Leon and say that they did kiss. So I'm sure you guys can see where this is going here, but all of this leads to Leon breaking up with Violetta.
Me estás cortando. ¿Me puedes decir por lo menos por qué?
Porque me dijiste que no besaste a Diego. Te acabo de ver, hablando con él, sonriéndole. Con eso me basta para saber que me mentiste otra vez.
Con eso te basta. Ah, tampoco te alcanza para olvidarte quién soy, León. Yo no besé a nadie, no te mentí.
Vi el video, Violeta.
¿Qué video, León? ¿De qué hablas? Mírame, León, yo no te estoy mintiendo, no besé a nadie, no sé cómo decírtelo.
Now, although this breakup is ridiculous, I actually really like how this scene ends. Violetta basically saying, if you believe Diego over me, then you don't know me at all, is great, and it's really nice to see her actually stand her ground in this argument. So the conversation ends with Violetta getting him to agree to wait till after the show so that she can prove to him that Diego means nothing to her. Which, for those of us who have seen the show, we know how well that plays out, but we'll get to that. So then, as per usual, we do get some nice Leonetta moments before everything falls down again. There's this cute scene before the show where Violetta goes to Leon for one of his hugs to help her calm down before the show. She also helps him calm down later with a hug after Diego tries to get under his skin again about this kiss. But now it's time for their performance. So Leon tells Vilu that he's going to be watching the whole thing and that she just has to think about him instead. This helps her to hallucinate Leon singing in Diego's place and also helps her get into the performance a bit more. And then we have the moment, the infamous Violetta moment, if you will, where at the end of the song, Violetta trips and Diego takes advantage of her by forcibly kissing her. Afterwards, Violetta runs to Leon, but he leaves in anger, which I think is the worst possible thing you could do after watching your partner get assaulted, but that's just my personal opinion. But to give him the benefit of the doubt, let's just say that he couldn't see things very clearly from where he was standing. Then somebody, Diego, uploads a video of the kiss that makes it look even less accidental. Leon sees this and then calls Violetta and breaks up with her again.
Ay, León, te llamé tantas veces, No, pero no sé, no me contestabas. Yo, León, no sé qué viste de afuera, pero yo puedo explicarte, lo que pasó fue que...
Violeta. Estoy harto. Hasta aquí llegué.
No entiendo.
Ya no puedo. Lo nuestro se acabó.
Honestly, I feel like I've said all I can about this situation at this point. Violetta getting blamed for her own assault is ridiculous, and despite the excuses I could come up with for Leon at this point, I'm just like not able to see things from his perspective. I know he has trauma here too, but at this point, this is just like next level disappointing. The next day after class, Leon goes to her and tells her that she needs to stop playing the victim, which is just so ridiculous because she is the victim. Like, no matter how you edit that video, it is still obvious that she is physically recoiling while he is kissing her. But again, Violetta doesn't let his words get to her and continues to stand up for herself, which I just love to see.
No voy a permitir que te hagas la víctima con esto.
¿Yo me hago la víctima?
Sí.
Leo, ¿no te das cuenta que vos cambiaste?
¿Yo cambié?
Sí, vos
Obvio cambié, porque ahora resulta que tú eres la enojada cuando tú besaste a Diego. Y además te eres la sufrida porque corté contigo, pobrecita.
Ay, ¿sabes qué? Me tenés cansada. Me tenés cansada porque estoy harta de explicarte siempre lo mismo y que no me creas, León.
Now we move on to Diego realizing that it's time for him to change his tactics. For those of you that don't know, the reason why he's been so pushy in pursuing Violetta is because he is working with Ludmilla. This is due to the fact that she promised to tell him who his father is if he helps her ruin Violetta's life. So just a little backstory as to his motives there, which will become relevant as we continue. So this time he has decided to go for a nicer approach in winning her over. He starts by going to both Violetta and Leon and apologizing for breaking them up. And then when they both don't accept his apology, he takes things a step further by showing them the real, unedited video of the kiss and admits to taking advantage of her. Or as he says, misunderstanding the situation. This is also when he admits to editing the video and putting it online. Unfortunately though, they both don't believe that he's doing this with good intentions, and this actually doesn't solve anything. So then I remind you of Lara, Leon's mechanic from earlier, as then this leads to Leon and Lara, as well as Violetta and Diego getting closer to one another. And you might be thinking like, oh my god, how could Violetta actually go for Diego after all of that? And like, I actually think it's pretty simple. First of all, she's at a point of weakness with everything that's going on, and then there's also the fact that he's doing a pretty good job at showing that he's changed. Violetta and Leon then find out that they're both getting closer to their respective person, and they're both unhappy with this information, despite the fact that they are broken up and no longer in a relationship with one another. In episode 27, we see Leon ask Lara out. We also see Violetta speculate with her friends that he liked Lara this whole time and has been painting her as the villain so that he doesn't feel guilty about pursuing her. Which is quite the theory. I mean, Violetta does have a creative mind, so I'll give her that. Then we have another repeat plot from the first season where Diego pushes Leon into saying that Violetta is even worse than him, as in Diego, and he says all of this while she overhears.
De hecho, no me esperaba menos de ti. Pero Violeta, sé que tú eres una mala persona, pero ella está peor. ¿Qué? Si te deja entrar y está contigo, son tal para cual. Sabías que estaba ahí, ¿verdad?
No, para nada. Pero ¿sabes qué? Me encanta que ella sepa lo que realmente piensas de ella.
And like, I know that he's being provoked in this moment, but I still feel like it's so messed up that he said that. That she's worse than Diego when Diego has harassed and assaulted somebody, like, that is so messed up. Moving on though, we then see that Diego's new tactic of kindness is working. I mean, who would have thought? Be nice to the girl? That's the last thing I'll try. That was my Diego impression, just to be clear. Anyways, Violetta has a dream about meeting Leon in the special place that he took her to. They almost kiss, and then he turns into Diego. And then at the end of the episode, they almost kiss in real life. So either Violetta is psychic or she's starting to have feelings for Diego. Maybe both. Who's to say? Later, Violetta calls Leon and asks if he's dating Lara, but he says no, and then she goes on to see them together in the park. Violetta is hurt by this, thinking that he's lied to her, and so she decides to go to his house that night.
No hacía falta que me mintieras.
¿Cuándo te mentí?
Cuando te pregunté si estaba saliendo con Lara. Y me dijiste que no. Pero lamentablemente los vi hoy en la plaza. Cuando te pasó a buscar con la moto.
Violeta, ¿eso es...?
León, vi cómo la mirabas. Y yo conozco esa mirada. Pero si me querías dejar a mí por ella, ¿por qué no me lo decías? Me mentiste en la cara, León.
Violeta, yo nunca te mentí.
¿Sabes qué? Decí lo que quieras porque no te creo más.
And this whole thing just bugs me. First of all, it's ridiculous. Violetta has no right to be asking him about his love life now that they've broken up. And second of all, she's also moving on. Like 5 seconds ago, she was almost kissing Diego, and you don't see Leon knocking on her door asking if she's seeing somebody else. It's just so high school, and I know that these kids, or at least Violetta, I don't really know the ages of the other students, but I know Violetta is still in high school, so like I can't really fault her too much, but it still just bugs me. But as I was saying, Violetta goes to Leon's and she expresses that she's upset with him for lying, and then he says that he didn't lie because he didn't technically lie, and then she leaves upset. But it's time for another non-romantic plot summary once again. So Violetta has been having trouble with her voice, and right before an upcoming performance, she loses it altogether and has to perform with a playback. Obviously, Leon is able to tell that she's lip-syncing because he knows her so well, unlike Diego. But he promises not to tell, of course. Leon then catches Violetta's dream psychic abilities as he dreams about Violetta and Diego almost kissing, and then they almost kiss in real life as well. Oh, and Leon and Lara almost kiss in this episode too. And then Herman decides to get involved, which he's just been loving to do in this season. So lately he has developed this alter ego called Jeremias, who works at the studio to spy on Violetta. So that's a whole other can of worms. But he goes to Leon as Jeremias to talk about Violetta, which causes Leon to get upset with Violetta because now he thinks that she's going to their school staff members to gossip about him. Then Diego interrupts this conversation in quite a hilarious way, if you ask me. And I say that because I don't know if anyone else finds Diego yelling Leon from 2 feet away as funny as my friends and I do, but I just had to include this nonetheless.
No entiendo de qué me estás hablando, León.
De Jeremías. Vino a buscarme.
Jeremías, el pianista del estudio, ¿y qué quería?
No te hagas de inocente conmigo, ¿eh? No sé qué tantas cosas le dijiste, pero me dijo que te dejara en paz.
León, ¿de qué estás hablando? Yo en ningún momento hablé con él de vos.
No te creo. De hecho, cada segundo te creo menos. Te desconozco.
¡León!
So I know that Leon is jumping to conclusions here, but Violetta was doing the same thing 5 seconds ago in regards to his relationship with Lara, so I kind of feel like they're both guilty here. Although I definitely think if Leon could have approached the situation with a lot less anger, then maybe they could have unmasked her dad a lot sooner. And then him and Lara get together. They kiss at the end of this episode, which in Violetta world makes them a couple, so that's great. Now I know a lot of people really enjoyed their relationship, but it's just so hard for me to like enjoy them together when in my opinion he really shouldn't be getting involved with anyone else right now. Moving on to episode 34, Violetta dreams dreams about Leon and telling him, ¿Cómo quieres que te quiera si te quiero? Y tú no quieres que te quiera como yo quiero creerte. Which translates to, how do you want me to love you if I love you, but you don't want me to love you the way that I love you? Which, as I think we all know, she later turns into lyrics for her smash hit, Como quieres. Later on in this episode, Ludmilla makes Violetta walk in on Leon and Lara kissing. She's upset by this, and Diego comes to comfort her. He walks her home, and then the two go on to cook together at her place. Leon then shows up to apologize, but the two just end up arguing over Diego and Lara. A couple days later, Violetta asks to be friends, but Leon says that he needs distance, which causes her to comment on how easy it was for him to forget about her. Which is actually quite funny because that is very much so not the case. He is constantly thinking about her. I'm just glossing over it because if I were to talk about every single time one of them is reminiscing over the other, we would be here all day because it basically happens in every single episode. Then we have the accidental date plotline, which also kind of reminds me of the note plotline from the last season. Just in the fact that it's so ridiculous and I don't really want to talk about it. But it also takes up so much time that I feel like I have to. So Germán, as Jeremias, overhears Leon telling Maxi about a date he has in the park. This leads to him thinking that he was referring to a date between him and Violetta. So he accuses Violetta of going to meet with him, which causes Violetta to think that he answered her phone like he's done before and didn't pass on the message that Leon would be waiting for her in the park. Then she shows up at this date that is not for her and grabs Leon's hand and asks if they're really over.
Hola, Leon. Perdóname que tarde. Lo que pasa es que hasta recién mi papá no me dio el mensaje.
¿Qué mensaje?
El mensaje que le dejaste para mí. Ay, León. Déjame hablar a mí. Yo sé que vos no te olvidaste de mí y que lo nuestro nunca terminó.
Violetta then notices Lara and Leon tells her that he was supposed to be meeting her, causing Violetta to run off. Later that night, he comes over to answer her question as to if there's still hope for them. Which I don't think he needed to do, like he could have just sent a text if he really felt like she needed an answer for that. I think it just further goes to show that he does still have feelings for her if he's using any excuse he can to go see her. But anyways, he goes on to say that there isn't a chance for them because he's with Lara now. The following night, she dreams about Leon and then is awoken by a call from him. He says that he couldn't sleep and needs to talk and just really needs to clarify that he didn't do anything to get her to meet him in the park. Which, like, I get that this is a weird situation. Like, he must be really puzzled as to how she ended up there, but I really don't think it's that big of a deal. I can just imagine him laying in bed at night and being like, you know, I shouldn't call her. Like, she means nothing to me. I'm trying to move on. But, you know, I should really let her know that I had nothing to do with the park thing. She really needs to know that. But enough about Leon and Lara, let's talk about Dialetta. So we've reached the mid-season finale where we've seen Diego and Violetta kiss and become a couple. But Violetta at the end of the day is still a creature of habit, so even though she is now dating somebody else, she has still not forgotten about Leon. So we're at the big showcase now, and Violetta has come to find out that Leon is not going to make it due to some conflicts with his motocross career. This brings her to decide to stall for him, and it's actually really sweet. She throws a fit about her shoes, then pretends to be lightheaded and feel faint to the point where she almost gets replaced by Ludmilla, all so that Leon could make it in time. Afterwards, he tries his best to thank her for this, but they keep getting interrupted. Then when they're finally left alone to talk, she ends up running off because she's lost her voice and she doesn't want him to find out. In the next episode, we see him meet up with her in the park as she's walking home. He thinks she's ignoring him because she's affected by Lara coming to the show and not because she's lost her voice. He also says that he found out about her and Diego and wishes that he could have heard it from her. I'm not really too sure why Violetta feels as though she can't tell him about her voice. Maybe it's because they're broken up now, but still I feel like either way he would have kept her secret. And I wish he would have shared it with them here because I feel like that would have been a really sweet moment. Then we reach a bit of a lull where not much happens. Violetta gets her voice back though, so don't worry, I know you were all very concerned. But a couple episodes later, Lara shows up at the studio to ask Violetta if she still has feelings for Leon to determine whether or not it's worth dating him. Clearly Lara is struggling with feeling second to her, which really sucks, but Violetta doesn't get a chance to reply because then Leon interrupts. But speaking of Leon, now it is time for him to be a little bit of a detective. So he finds out that Violetta is having problems with her voice and wasn't able to talk to him before because of that. He goes over to her house to talk about this, but then he stumbles on a conversation between Diego and Ludmilla. The whole thing seems suspicious, and so he sticks around to eavesdrop. But then Diego notices Leon hiding behind a tree and pretends to defend Violetta to Ludmilla. This brings Leon to go over to Violetta's again that night, but this time to warn her about what he saw. Unfortunately though, she's not very receptive to this and just thinks that he's trying to stop her from moving on. Then we reach the era in which Leon is really hung up over Violetta. And I'm not sure if he's just like, this has been going on for too long and I miss her, or if seeing her with Diego for real has given him like a sort of wake-up call. But either way, his feelings are really starting to show now. In episode 47, he asks Andres how long it takes to stop hurting. Not sure if Andres is going to have the answer to that question, but he asks anyways. In the following episode, Leon hallucinates Violetta's head on Lara's body. And then when they bump into each other at the studio, Leon tells Violetta that he knows that he's the one that she really loves, and then she accidentally falls into his arms.
Es muy difícil con vos, León.
¿Por qué? ¿Porque no soy Diego?
No sos Diego. Y te falta mucho para llegar a ser como él.
Tal vez me falta mucho para llegar a ser como Diego, pero me falta esto para ser el hombre que realmente amas.
Unfortunately, though, this does not lead to some grand resolution. He just comments on saving her once again, and then they go on to argue for a bit. And then later on in the same episode, while on a date with Lara, Leon accidentally calls her Violetta, and then this eventually leads her to break up with him. A couple episodes later, Violetta bumps into him at the studio, and he can tell that she's upset with something, and so she hugs him. And afterwards, they share a sweet moment, talking again about how his hugs always calmed her down. Then Lara and Leon have probably the shortest breakup of all time as they get back together. But now that they've shared a few moments together once again, this has led to some confusion on Violetta's part, and she's really worried about being torn between two guys once again. To get ahead of this, she goes over to Leon's to ask again if there is any hope for them.
Pero antes necesito preguntarte porque yo no quiero volver a pasar por lo mismo, Leo.
¿Cómo que lo mismo?
A estar entre dos chicos. Yo no quiero que me pase eso, y si mi corazón no puede olvidarte, yo lo voy a ayudar, León. Pero antes necesito que me digas.
But Leon doesn't say anything, and so she takes this as his response and leaves. A few days later, they have this weird conversation where they both tease one another over their significant other. Leon about Violetta gifting Diego a guitar, and Violetta about him and Lara being in a motocross magazine. And then they get into this weird argument that ends with Violetta kissing his cheek and asking for a truce. Now back to Detective Leon. So he sees Diego and Ludmilla meeting in a park, causing him to confront Diego about this. And obviously, that conversation leads nowhere. Later, Leon goes on to do some more sleuthing and discovers that Diego and Ludmilla used to be friends through a very badly photoshopped image. Meanwhile, Diego and Ludmilla have been plotting a scheme in which Diego is going to destroy the guitar that Violetta got for him and pin it on Leon. Diego hasn't been too sure about following through with this plan until he reads in Violetta's diary that she still has feelings for Leon, which makes him go through with it. So Diego, quote-unquote, discovers his ruined guitar, and then Violetta immediately believes that Leon did it, freaking out at him.
¿Cómo puedes hacer una cosa así? ¿Qué tienes en la cabeza, León? ¿Qué te pasa?
A ver, Violeta, ¿qué te pasa a ti? ¿Cómo crees que voy a hacer eso?
¡Oh, qué mentiroso eres, por favor!
No puedo creer cómo me equivoqué tanto con vos. No puedo creer.
Violeta,
¿Violeta qué? ¿Violeta qué?
Violeta,
León?
yo no hice eso, no soy capaz.
¡Cállate!
¡Cállate! ¡Cierra la boca!, ¿ok? Violeta, no soy capaz de eso, tú me conoces bien.
No, no te conozco, no sé quién sos. Andate, León. Andate, León.
And now this whole situation clearly does a number on Leon, as we later see him get into another motocross accident. But again, don't worry, he's fine, because as we all know, the true love interest accidents don't happen until the 3rd season. This brings them to cross paths later in the park and fight over whether or not Leon destroyed the guitar until Lara interrupts. And this results in Violetta giving her some unsolicited advice. Or I guess you could argue that it was solicited because she did come to Violetta a few episodes ago, but that being said, I still don't think it was Violetta's place to say what she does say here because it is quite harsh.
León, ahora estás muy equivocada. León y yo no tenemos nada ni lo vamos a tener nunca más. Él es una mala persona. Y te voy a dar un consejo. Si todavía no estás tan enamorada como yo lo estuve de él, aléjate. No dejes que te lastime como me lastimó a mí. Sos la peor persona que conocí en toda mi vida.
As far as Leon is concerned, though, this doesn't really have any consequences for him because him and Lara fight about this for a few seconds and then make up right away. Moving on, Violetta and Leon then get paired up for the studio's upcoming dance assignment, which isn't really that big of a deal now, but it will be later. After class, Ludmilla tries to get under Violetta's skin by showing her a video of Leon and Lara kissing. The video clearly affects her, but she says that it doesn't because she's with Diego now. Then at the end of the episode, she catches Ludmilla and Diego in a storage closet hugging. So now with their relationship on the rocks, it's time for Leon to get involved. First of all, Andres tells Leon that Violetta saw the video of him and Lara kissing and it upset her. Then he overhears Diego discussing things with Violetta over the phone, which leads him to go talk to her.
Bueno, yo entiendo perfectamente que te duela o no te caiga muy bien que yo esté con Lara.
No hace falta que te hagas el canal conmigo, ¿sí? Permiso. León, igual te puedo decir algo.
¿Sí?
Vos estás con Lara y sos feliz con Lara y yo estoy contigo. Estoy de novia contigo. No sé si te acordás, estoy feliz yo también. Así que estas cosas nos tienen que empezar a no molestar, te aviso. No sé por qué me dices decir esto, porque a mí no me molesta que vos estés con Lara, te aviso.
Sí.
So Violeta asks for his take on what he thought was going on between Ludmilla and Diego and tells him what she saw. Unfortunately though, he turns this into an I told you so moment, and so she gets upset with him and leaves. Not without yelling at him for a bit first though.
Surprisingly enough though, this is actually when the couple begins to reconcile, and so it's time for chapter 9.
So starting at episode 64, which is their first rehearsal together, we begin with them being quite hostile with one another since they're not exactly on good terms at the moment, and then their significant others come in and they both put on a show of hugging their other person.
No puedo, bueno, lo que pasa es que tengo que ir al karaoke con las chicas. ¡Ay, qué divertido! Sí, re divertido, sí. Si quieren vengan, ¿eh? No hay problema.
No, justo tenemos otros planes.
Ay, bueno, buenísimo. Bueno, me voy. ¿Sí? ¡Mua! Chao.
On to their next rehearsal, in which Violeta has just received the news about Angie having this job opportunity in France. And this affects her ability in focusing while practicing with Leon. And he thinks that this is due to the fact that their dance assignment has just turned into this competition where the winning couple will get to perform together in Spain. Which might be part of it, but no, Angie is the real issue here. So she goes on to confide in him and he gives her a pep talk and they hug.
Sí, cambió tu vida para siempre. Pero ahora lo puedes hacer sola. Tienes que confiar en ti y en lo que ella te enseñó. Ya no necesitas ayuda de nadie para marcarte el camino. Y te vas a dar cuenta que tengo razón.
¿De verdad piensas eso?
No, lo sé.
And I feel like this is definitely a turning point in their relationship. This is when they get to be on good terms again as we near the end of the season, and I like that it doesn't completely come out of nowhere. Now with all that being said, it is time for our Leonetta duet of the season. So during their next rehearsal, Violeta awkwardly comes in while Leon is playing his guitar and he goes on to watch her, kind of creepily I might add, while she gets ready to rehearse. This leads him to start playing Nuestro Camino and she compliments it, which causes him to reveal that he just came up with it while watching her. They go on to rehearse, and that last move where Violeta ends up in his arms really seems to affect her. They run it again and the same thing happens where Violeta freezes face to face with him. Then that night, Violeta comes up with some lyrics to go with the melody that Leon was strumming earlier. And we also see Leon working on some chords before it goes into full-on Nuestro Camino music video mode. And so now it's time to add another thing to Violeta's plate, as if Angie leaving wasn't enough. Because then she finds out about her dad being Jeremias. So she calls Leon for comfort and he offers to come over, but then they get interrupted by Lara. And now we're kind of in a sticky situation because these two are clearly making their ways back to one another, but yet they're still in relationships with other people, which really is just not cool. The next day, the boys perform their new song, Ven con nosotros, and during their performance, Diego stops the song and gets upset with Leon for singing to his girlfriend, which probably wasn't the right way to handle things here, but I kind of understand why Diego snaps here. For the entirety of this season, Leon has been singing to Violeta during their performances, and she's had to struggle with not knowing who to look at. And I honestly feel like it was just a matter of time before somebody had enough in this situation. The next day, Violeta gets overwhelmed with everything that's been going on with her dad, and Ludmilla's bullying on top of that doesn't help, and so she leaves the studio upset. And then, of course, who comes to her rescue but none other than Leon. So he finds her and they do this grand reveal to show that it's him, which makes me chuckle a little bit. But he distracts her by talking a bit about the competition and then offers to walk her home. On their walk home, they end up stumbling upon his special place that he took her earlier in the season. They reminisce on all that's happened and then almost kiss. Which is wild because, like I said, they're both still in relationships with other people.
No entiendo cómo llegamos hasta acá, Leon.
¿Te acuerdas?
¿Cómo me voy a olvidar?
Thankfully, Violeta goes on to stop him and remind him of the existence of their partners, and they both agree not to do anything in fear of ruining their newfound friendship. But even with all of that being said, they still go on to basically have a date. They move on to another bench where they both go on to ignore phone calls from their respective partners and reminisce over their relationship once again. They even go on to sing Hoy Somos Más together, and I'm just like, this is a date. This is a date that we are watching. This is an affair that is happening on screen in this program that is meant for children. Anyways, they end their date by hugging goodbye as quote-unquote friends, and then as if on cue, that is when their significant others appear. The next day, they ask one another if they had problems with their partners, which I just wanted to include as proof of the fact that they both knew that they did something wrong and have guilt about it, which they should, because cheating is bad. Like, I think that's something we can all agree on at least. But enough relationship drama, it's time for the dance competition. So Leon and Vilu are getting ready for their performance, and we see Leon comforting her beforehand. And it's actually kind of a messed up moment as he tells her that this is the only way in which they can express their true feelings. When it's like, I have an idea, you could just break up with the people that you were dating and be together. What a concept.
Leon, estoy muy nerviosa, no sé si voy a poder.
Tranquila, No pasa nada.
Ya vimos a varios concursantes.
De hecho, este es el único momento donde podemos estar juntos y expresar nuestros sentimientos.
Todavía falta una pareja.
Vamos a disfrutarlo.
Sí, hay que hacer eso.
Anyways, they go on to do the routine and end it by staring at one another longer than necessary, as per usual. And then in an event that I'm sure nobody expected, they are announced as the winners. Now, apparently this is when Leon and Lara break up, but it's like super unclear to me. They basically just talk and then she disappears, and then later Leon says that they broke up. So I guess they broke up.
Then we have another repeat plotline from the first season where Herman decides that Violetta is not allowed to go to Spain. And so this results in both of her boyfriends showing up at her house to try to convince him otherwise. But of course, Violetta is actually the one who ends up changing his mind in the end. So now we're in Madrid. Leon asks to explore with Vilu, but Diego interrupts. And then we have this montage scene where the two boys fight over showing her the city. And then this brings Violetta to telling Fran that she is torn between the two of them. Then while watching Diego and Fran's rehearsal, Violetta asks Leon about Lara, which causes him to reveal that they broke up. Later, she asks him why and if it had anything to do with her or this trip, and he lies and says no. When in reality, she was very threatened by the idea of him traveling with Violetta. Meanwhile, Fran gets involved in Leon's detective work after she overhears a phone call between Diego and Ludmilla. They both decide not to tell Violetta due to her negative reactions previously, but agree to keep working together to discover what he's hiding. The next day, Violetta catches Leon following her, and so she asks him to stop because she doesn't want any more problems with Diego. And he says that he will stop if she can look him in the eyes and tell him that she is in love with Diego. So she does this, but then later admits to Fran that she lied.
Hoy Leon me preguntó si estaba enamorada de Diego. Me dijo que si lo miraba a los ojos y le decía que estaba enamorada de él, él se alejaba de mí para siempre. ¿Y qué le dijiste? Le mentí. Le mentí, pero la verdad es que no puedo dejar de pensar en él, Fran. Estoy enamorada de Leon.
But now, 75 episodes later, it is finally time to unmask Diego. So before their performance, Leon is able to record a phone call between Diego and Ludmilla where he admits their entire plan. Leon tells Fran about what he recorded, and they agree not to tell Violetta until after the show. But in typical Violetta fashion, she overhears this conversation and goes on to watch the video for herself. Obviously, Violetta is a mess, upset with herself for trusting someone who was only trying to hurt her, and this is when Leon comes in to comfort her.
¿Cómo puedo ser tan tonta, Leon? ¿Cómo no me di cuenta de eso? No lo puedo creer.
Tranquila. Podría hablar con Antonio.
No, no quiero hablar con nadie. Yo voy a salir a cantar.
Violeta,
Yo voy a salir a cantar, Leon. Leon, voy a salir a cantar. De verdad, te estoy hablando.
Mírate.
Vos mírame a mí, mírame a mí. No voy a dejar que Diego me arruine este momento. No lo voy a dejar.
Bueno, yo no voy a dejar que salgas así, te arriesgues.
Leon, voy a salir a cantar.
No puedes.
Es lo que quería mi mamá.
So then we see Violetta get up on stage to sing, and she freezes. And this results in arguably the best scene from the series overall, and I know that I've said that a lot, but I really mean it with this one. So he gets them to change the track to Podemos and then gets on stage and sings with her. It really is just such a beautiful moment, and I'm so glad that I wasn't spoiled to this happening before I watched the show. Going in blind here to what happens just makes it that much better. Like, I'm pretty sure I screamed the first time I saw it. Moving on, in the following episode, Violetta talks with Diego and then goes on to do a sad girl walk in Madrid, thinking about everything that's happened. Then she ends up running into Leon and hugs him. She cries, blaming herself again for what happened, and he comforts her.
Yo hice todo lo posible para alejarme de lo que sentía y me aferré a Diego sin pensar en nada. Soy una tonta.
Hey, deja de buscar explicaciones, ¿ok? Acaba de pasar, es normal que te sientas así.
Me encantaría que todo entre nosotros fuese distinto.
Lo que pasó ya pasó.
Entiendo.
But now that their performance is over, it's time to head back to Argentina. After class the next day, Violetta calls Leon but gets his voicemail. Then she sees him meeting with Lara and jumps to conclusions. So she thinks that they have gotten back together when they were actually just having an official breakup instead of whatever that conversation was that they had before Madrid. But of course, Violetta doesn't know this, and so she avoids him the next day because of it. A couple episodes later, Leon performs Nuestro Camino for the class and basically sings it to her. Then he tries to talk with her after, but she's very short with him. He even asks her if they can try again, but she gets mad at him and then leaves. And I know that they're just trying to drag it out so that they can have them get back together closer to the finale, but this whole interaction just makes no sense. And it's almost like infuriating to watch just because Violetta is being so ridiculous.
¿No me estás hablando en serio, Leon? Decime que es un chiste así me río.
No es
¿No
un
estás
chiste,
hablando en serio?
Violeta, es en serio. Tal vez no es el mejor momento.
No, no es el mejor momento.
¿No te das cuenta cómo estoy, León? No quiero hablar más con vos.
Ey, ¿ves? ¿Ves?
¿Ves qué?
Me estás tratando otra vez así. ¿Por qué? No entiendo.
Vos sí sabes por qué te estoy tratando así. Yo también lo sé.
No sé.
Los dos lo sabemos. No te hagas el tonto.
No sé de qué estás hablando.
No quiero hablar más con vos. Y no me sigas.
The next day, we see her practicing Nuestro Camino with Beto, which is ironically one of my personal favorite scenes. I just love when we get to hear Beto sing, like he's got a beautiful voice. But Leon comes in and she sings to him for a minute before stopping, saying that she can't. But you know what? We're at episode 78, so I guess that means that they can get back together now. So Fede, remember him? Yeah, he tells Leon that Violeta thought that him and Lara got back together. And Lara tells Violeta that they broke up. So after finding out this shocking information, the two of them both end up back at their special spot and sing Nuestro Camino together. Leon further explains the Lara situation and Violeta apologizes. Then they promise for the second time that they're not going to let anybody get between them again.
¿Me prometes que no vamos a estar separados otra vez? Jamás.
¿De verdad me hablas?
Sí, en serio.
Obvio que no, León. ¿No te das cuenta de lo que acaba de pasar? Nada ni nadie nos va a separar. Te lo prometo.
Yo quiero estar contigo.
Yo también quiero estar contigo.
That night, Leon ends up coming over, and then we have this scene that I actually feel like I like even more so than the scene where they got back together on the bench. I just like how sweet Leon is being to her and how he's doing everything he can to try to make her feel better. And this is due to the fact that she's still upset about something, but she doesn't know what it is. Oh, and they almost kiss here too, but then get interrupted.
No estoy mejor.
Tienes que olvidarte de Diego.
Pero yo no pienso en Diego.
Entonces, ¿qué es? ¿Qué puedo hacer para que estés bien?
Con que estés acá ya es mucho y me sirve, de verdad.
Then we start to realize that this problem that she's been having is due to her relationship with her dad. So then we have this other sweet moment where Herman asks Leon to look out for Violeta since he's not able to do so at the moment because she's not letting him get close to her. And this is all due to the fact that her dad lying to her so that he can spy on her for the entirety of the season has really done a number on Violeta, and so she's not able to trust him at this moment, which is why he's asking for Leon's help here. And it's just such a good moment, like it almost makes me want to cry. And then Ramajo comes in and reveals to Leon that the song that Violeta is working on, Soy mi mejor momento, was actually written by both her dad and her mom when she was pregnant with her. And then he goes on to give Leon the task of telling this information to Violeta. So now we have finally made it to our season 2 finale. Leon has organized for her dad to come to the show and accompany Violeta for her performance of Soy mi mejor momento, and this is also when he reveals to her that her parents wrote it. Afterwards, she hugs him and thanks him for bringing her closer to her dad once again, and they shared te amos.
Ay, gracias. Gracias por ayudarme a reencontrarme con mi papá. Hiciste lo imposible para que yo esté feliz.
Te amo.
Yo también.
¿Tú también qué?
Que yo también te amo.
And that's basically it. That is where we wrap up season 2. They share a kiss on stage after their final number, which is really sweet, but I do kind of wish that they could have kissed during their te amo scene. But yeah, overall, no complaints from me. I feel like season 2 ended perfectly, and I feel like it would have been a lot easier to ship them if this is where things had ended. But as we all know, that is not the case, and so it's time to talk about season 3. So we have finally reached the final and my personal favorite season of the series. We pick things up with the gang on tour with Umix, and Leon describes it as even better because he's sharing it with the love of his life. How sweet. But even though it seems as though this couple has been smooth sailing since we saw them last, Violeta is here to remind us that this relationship still lacks any form of trust. So she overhears a phone call of Leon's and asks who it was, and he lies and says that it was Fede, but she's still suspicious. These suspicions have to take a back seat though, as the following day is her birthday. The morning of, we see Violeta come down to meet with her friends, and she's a little bit disappointed as it seems as though they haven't done anything to celebrate. Then Leon wishes her a happy birthday and sings to her, all while she still looks very confused. And this is actually another one of my absolute favorite moments from the series. Mainly because of, like I said, she looks very confused. But enough birthday, now it's time for Leon to save her again, as he does so well in every season's first encounter. So during their next performance, Violeta has to fill in for Ludmilla. While performing, her ropes give out, and then Leon has to rush on stage to catch her. And I honestly think that out of all the ones we've covered, although it's a bit simple, I think this one is my favorite one. But now I feel like this episode is giving me whiplash because now it's time to get back to Violeta's trust issues. So she ends up dragging Fran along
Hong to spy on him, and then she finds him with another girl. But Leon knows his girlfriend quite well, and this was actually all a part of his grand plan. So he presents her flowers and surprises her with a hot air balloon that he has apparently been taking lessons in for 2 months to learn how to fly, all for this big birthday surprise. And I would be lying if I didn't say that I was majorly impressed with this gift. And honestly, this scene is just so cute, like it makes me want to cry like a little baby.
¿Qué es esto?
Tu regalo. Llevo 2 meses aprendiendo a volar.
Con razón desaparecías 2 veces por semana y ni siquiera me decías dónde ibas. Y yo que pensé todo lo contrario, en realidad sos lo más lindo en todo este mundo. León, ¿vamos a volar?
Sí, juntos.
Violetta is a bit nervous, but Leon reassures her, and there's this really sweet moment where he asks her if she's ready, and she says that she'll always be ready when she's with him. They share a sweet moment while in the air, and then Leon pulls out his guitar, surprising her once again, but this time with the song that he wrote for her. Now it's all sunshine and rainbows until Leon comes to realize that the knot that was used to tie them to the ground has come loose, and so now they are actually flying. So he breaks the news to Vilu, and she starts freaking out, and we have this really great moment where he's trying to calm her down, but then they're basically just arguing with one another.
¿Qué vamos a hacer, León?
Volar.
¿Cómo volar? No sabemos volar. Las aves vuelan, las águilas vuelan, las gallinas. Las gallinas tampoco vuelan, igual que nosotros que no sabemos volar y no sabemos qué hacer tampoco.
Nosotros estamos volando.
No, porque esto no respeta las leyes de la aerodinámica.
No respeta
eso.
esas leyes, pero respeta las leyes de la termodinámica, donde los gases se calientan, se hacen más livianos y eso es lo que nos eleva.
Evidently, Leon is able to land their balloon, and so I guess you could say this is another situation in which he saved her. Now that they're back on the ground, Violetta wants to go find the others, but Leon explains that in these situations, you're supposed to wait in the place that you landed and the help will come to you. So they spread out their blanket and get ready to wait, cuddled on the ground and talking about their futures together. They even almost kiss, but then are interrupted by their friend's arrival.
Yo sueño una vida feliz y plena al lado tuyo, pero para toda la vida, ¿cómo hago para soñar eso?
Tal vez no es mucho como soñarlo, es vivirlo, construir momentos como este y disfrutarlo. No imagino mi vida sin ti.
Yo tampoco.
However, in typical Leonetta fashion, this happiness doesn't last for long. The next day, Violetta organizes for them to be on a talk show the same day that Leon had organized for the band to play at this festival. Violetta tries to apologize, but Leon is upset that she made this decision without talking to him first. He also says that if she's going to ask him to choose between the band and UMix, he's going to choose the band. So he's definitely making his priorities for this season quite clear. They argue about this some more in the following episode, and then he calls her that night and apologizes. But even though it seems as though they have solved this problem, that is actually far from the truth. Leon then gets the news that UMix has decided to drop his band from their record label, and Diego has also left the studio, and so he's kind of not really too sure what to do now. So he comes over to Violetta's to talk about it and explains how he's been feeling a bit lost and like he's been spending his time on the wrong things. Violetta comforts him through this, and then he concludes that he's going to leave the studio. She is not happy with this decision whatsoever and tries to talk him out of it, but Leon says that he has to go and clear his head. And by go clear his head, I guess he means that he's got to go to the motocross track. So then we see the two of them there, and Violetta isn't too sure that motocross is the best way for him to clear his head, but he reassures her that everything will be fine. They share I love yous, and then he goes off to race.
Tranquila, solo quiero correr para desahogarme un poco. Voy a estar bien.
Bueno, cuídate, ¿sí?
Siempre. Soy el más afortunado del mundo. Porque te tengo, en las buenas y en las malas. Gracias.
¿Te puedo abrazar? Te amo.
Te amo.
Then, as I'm sure in an event that nobody expected, Leon gets in an accident for the 3rd time. Then in the next episode, we see just how serious this accident was, like I hinted at when we were talking about his accidents in the 2nd season, but this time it is very serious as we see him at the hospital. Violetta is freaking out, asking if he's okay, and then we come to find out that he is okay, but he is unconscious. After some waiting, Violetta is finally let into the room that he's in, and then she talks to him for a bit. On to the next day, where we see her visiting him once again, and she writes in her diary that she wishes that real life was more like fairy tales where we could just solve everything with a kiss. Then she sings to him, kisses him, and magically he awakes. Disney proving once again that true love's kiss reigns supreme. So we see him wake up very confused, but then he does seem to remember everything that happened. And then we have this sweet moment where he tells her that he gets to go home tomorrow.
¿Y cómo estás? ¿Cómo te sentiste? ¿Duele algo? ¿Estás bien? ¿Necesitas algo para tomar algo?
Mañana me puedo ir a mi casa.
¿Mañana ya? ¿Mañana?
Mañana.
va a querer, no sabes lo que gritaría, pero lo que pasa es que acá no se puede gritar mucho.
Moving on to episode 8, which is when we meet Jerry. We also meet Clément in this episode, but he's not really that relevant yet. These two are basically our Leonetta villains this season, and we see this at the end of this episode when Jerry hugs Leon as a thank you for getting her a job, and then Violetta sees this and then is upset by it. Then it's time for Leon's trust to waver as he shows up at her house, and then Alex or Clément is already there, and then he is also upset by this. And of course, Alex is just this guy that Violetta met earlier and agreed to help with his audition for the studio, but Leon doesn't know this. So that night, he calls her and they both argue over what they saw, clearly still unable to trust the other person with anybody of the opposite sex. This argument continues into the next episode where things get worse once he sees Violetta at the studio watching Alex's audition, and they continue on not so great terms until the following episode where they do make up.
No tenemos que olvidar que lo que tenemos es muy fuerte. Es diferente a todo.
Y nadie lo puede arruinar.
Ni siquiera nosotros.
¿Y si nos vuelve a pasar? La música siempre nos va a unir o nos va a recordar nuestro amor.
And although this is so irritating because we've seen this happen time and time again and this resolution really didn't solve any of their issues, this scene is still pretty cute, I will give it that. But of course, this Alex conflict is far from over, as we see in the next episode once Leon gets jealous at seeing the two of them talking once again.
Compañero.
Hola amor, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, ¿y tú?
Bien. ¿Te pasa algo que estás como un poquito serio?
No, mira.
Ah.
Vamos.
Sí. Chao, Alex.
Chao. Qué bueno que estés mejor, León.
Gracias.
Qué bueno.
Now let's get back to Leon wanting to leave the studio. So he tells Violetta that he's going to leave after their next show, and Violetta is again upset by this decision even though she previously said that she would support him through anything. But instead, she asks him to think it over one more time, and he agrees. And then I guess he did enough thinking, because the next day he announces to everybody that he's leaving. And then this is when Violetta goes a bit rogue. She goes on to beg Pablo, one of their teachers, to try to get him to change his mind, but then when he says that he respects his decision and is not going to do that, she takes things a step further. She then goes to Diego and asks him to break up the band for her, all because she doesn't want Leon to leave the studio. And I'm just like, to take something that you know your boyfriend loves so much to the point where he's choosing it over everything else in his life away just because you don't think his decision is the right one, like, that is so messed up. As his girlfriend, she should 100% be respecting and supporting his decision even if she doesn't think it's the right one. And I feel like this goes without saying, but she should definitely not be going behind his back to try to sabotage his dreams. Like, that is so messed up. One of the top 10 worst things Violetta did in this entire show, and I'm not even exaggerating. Luckily though, Diego and Leon have grown to become a lot closer in this season already, and so he does go to Leon and tells her what Violetta asked of him. This causes another argument between the two of them where Leon says that he doesn't like how she keeps trying to make decisions for him. And honestly, I feel like he let her off easy on this one. Violetta then goes on to travel to Spain with her family, and then while there, she meets up with Angie, as like I said, she is working in France. So Angie gives her some advice on the situation and says that she was wrong and should have supported him even if she doesn't agree with him. So basically what I just said. She then realizes that Angie was right and calls Leon to fix things, but this conversation ends in an argument for the millionth time. But then they go on to share a phone call the following day where they both apologize, and it finally seems like things are okay again. Violetta then returns from Spain and they're finally able to meet in person once again. They have a date in the park where he plays Nuestro Camino for her and gives her flowers. They also apologize to one another once again, and it's nice to see them finally handling things responsibly.
Si tuvieses un sombrero, te daría una moneda.
Bienvenida, mi amor. Te estaba esperando.
Las flores y la canción muy lindas, pero ninguna de las dos son lo que me prometiste.
Tengo un abrazo esperándote.
¿Y qué esperas para dármelo?
Violetta then goes on to stress about the upcoming U-Mix tour and how they don't have a replacement for Leon yet, and then he immediately says that he'll do it. Which is a moment that I personally really liked. Because it was obvious that she was just venting, like she wasn't expecting him to step up or anything, but then for him to do that was just so sweet. But time to get back on that toxicity train. So that night he comes over and finds a book that Alex gifted to Violetta, and he gets upset. This time though, she's able to calm him down by explaining that Alex is just grateful to her for helping him get into the studio. Leon apologizes and then confesses that he's just a little bit out of sorts ever since the band decided to break up for tour. Then we end the scene with Leon revealing that her hugs help calm him down too, and so she hugs him.
Porque siempre pensé que era solo yo el que te podía calmar con un abrazo, por ejemplo. Ahora cambió.
No te estoy abrazando igual, así que no sé, me estás diciendo.
Bueno, entonces, ¿qué estás esperando?
Tengo muchos abrazos para darte.
And then in an event that I'm sure nobody expected, the Alex problems continue. The next day, Violetta defends him when Andres accuses him of stealing, and Leon is not impressed. He gets mad at her, saying that Alex has feelings for her and she's just leading him on. Alex interrupts this fight and tries to defend her, but then he just ends up making the whole situation even worse. She finds him again later and asks him to trust her, but then he ends up comparing the whole situation to what happened with Diego last year. And although Violetta still doesn't really see the comparison, they do end up coming to an agreement. But now we're back in Spain for the tour, so the two share a walk on the beach and almost kiss. Then we're at the theater before the show and the two actually kiss, which kind of caught me off guard because usually it's a much bigger moment than that. But I like seeing them kiss naturally, like it gives them more of a realistic relationship vibe. Ludmilla then causes some trouble when she tells Leon that Alex gave Violetta a USB stick of a whole bunch of love songs to listen to while on tour. Leon is upset by this, but then we never get any sort of resolution to this conflict because then Antonio dies. Antonio, for those of you who don't know, was the head of the studio, and so his passing means that the tour is cancelled. And if you've never seen the show, it's a very emotional moment that caught all of the viewers by surprise. I personally remember bawling my eyes out for this man that I don't think I would have given a second thought to before any of this. Anyways, after getting back from Spain, Violetta goes to talk to Leon. This time she's upset with him for not going to the studio and being with everyone during this time of grieving. But he says that he's done with the studio and is trying to move on, and then this inevitably leads to them having a very unclear breakup.
¿Qué me vas a cortar ahora? ¿No ves que tengo razón, que siempre me dejas sola?
Mira, lo único que quiero es que me entiendas, que aceptes mi decisión. Mira, yo puedo hablar con Pablo y decirle que puede contar conmigo para lo que quiera, pero...
No podés decir que no te entiendo, León, cuando siempre estoy pendiente de vos. Yo no quiero que después vos te vayas y te arrepientas y te haces alejado de todos nosotros.
A ver, confía en mí, yo sé lo que hago, ¿ok?
También te podés equivocar.
Bueno, no sé, no puedo hablar contigo.
Yo tampoco puedo hablar con vos.
Now this one is hard for me because I do feel like it is a situation where I can see both sides. She's upset with him for not being with everybody when somebody just died, whereas he sees it as his commitment being over. But at the end of the day, they've basically been fighting nonstop since this season started, and so I do think that this breakup was a good choice for them. In the next episode, he comes to the studio and Violetta gets upset with him for going to the studio to make plans for his band, saying that he only cares about himself.
Yo no lo puedo creer.
No.
¿Venís al estudio para organizar los ensayos de tu banda y para ayudar al estudio ni siquiera apareces?
No, Violeta, en realidad...
No. Sí, ¿sabes qué? Tienes razón. Soy la peor persona del mundo, ¿no? Me interesan solo mis cosas, no me interesa el estudio y no me interesas tú. Me conoces muy bien, felicidades.
Now this argument bugged me because she doesn't know the real reason why he came there, which was actually to ask Pablo how he could help. And second, the majority of his band goes to the studio. I don't think him going there to talk to them is that unreasonable or selfish, but that's just my opinion. But now it's time for things to take a turn as we reach the Leonetta plotline that makes Violetta arguably the worst character to come from Disney Channel. Again, in my own opinion, of course. But yes, it is finally time to talk about Roxy.
No.
In episode 24, Alex tells Violetta about a rehearsal with Leon's band in which JD was invited to. Once again, Violetta jumps to conclusions and starts freaking out at the idea of something going on between the two of them. She tells Fran that she wants to go to this rehearsal and she helps her see that going to this rehearsal that she wasn't invited to is a bad idea. But then she comes up with an even worse idea. This leads to the two of them showing up at this rehearsal in disguises. So they say that they were just passing by and heard the song that they were playing and came to look for a place to rehearse. And of course, due to the Disney Channel wig effect, Leon does not recognize them.
¿Te conozco de algún lado?
¡Imposible! ¿Por qué? Es imposible. ¿Por qué? Porque no nos cruzamos nunca en nuestras vidas, ¿entiendes? Rosa, ¿por qué no vamos a buscar otra sala de ensayo mejor?
Claro,
¿no?
sí.
Bueno, lamento que esta no sea una sala de ensayo, pero suerte con eso, ¿ok?
Bueno, bye.
Afterwards, Vilu says that she just has to do it again, and then Fran reminds her how hypocritical she's being. If you'll recall, her father did the exact same thing to her last year, and it really hurt their relationship. So why on earth she thinks that this is any different is beyond me. Also, just like talk about inconsistent in comparison to Violetta at the end of season 2. But she says that it's not the same because her dad is older and knows better. Now, I feel like by saying that, she's also kind of insinuating that she also knows better, but like, I guess that's the explanation that we're gonna be going with. That night, she decides to call Leon and ask him if he's moved on to someone else, and so I guess at least she's consistent in some sense. He says no, and then they argue a bit before she hangs up. Then Roxy and Fausta are back at Leon's garage. They again ask to use his space to rehearse, and so he asks to hear them sing first. Fran is not too sure about this, knowing that Leon will recognize their voices, but Violetta says that it's okay because they'll sing in English. Even though in the previous season, he heard her sing in Mi Mundo in Inglés like numerous times. But honestly, we're just throwing continuity out the door at this point. Nonetheless, she goes on to perform underneath it all, and Leon is unfazed. And he's also still unsure if he should let them rehearse there or not until Violetta asks again, all flirty-like.
Sí, Roxy, Leon, nuestro amigo Leon, dijo que no podemos irnos ahora, gracias.
No. ¿Podrías hacer una excepción por nosotras?
No lo incomodes más, visitemos otras salas de ensayo, a ver si nos gusta más.
Leon.
Puedo hacer una excepción. Voy a hablar con los chavos y voy a checar qué horarios está libre para que puedan ensayar.
Qué padre. Gracias.
We then get an awkward goodbye hug, and then the next day he emails her to come rehearse there. Violetta gets excited about this, but then gets mad that Leon doesn't know that it's her and is inviting another girl over to his garage. Anyways, she goes, flirts with him again for a bit, and then sings underneath it all again. In the following episode, we realize that Roxy is really starting to have an effect on Leon as he tells Fede that he feels a really strong connection with her, and that she could even replace Violetta in his life. Later, Francesca begs Violetta to put an end to this, but she says that she can't because she just needs to see how far Leon will go. And I'm sorry, but I'm just like, this is so messed up, and like, not to mention so unhealthy for everybody involved. Nonetheless, Violetta then gets an email from Leon asking to meet with Roxy, and so she agrees. So she goes to his garage and he confesses to her that he feels a connection with her and wants to get to know her better. She gets upset with him over this, and then they get interrupted by Gregorio. So Gregorio comes in and he asks Roxy to perform in the studio's upcoming showcase. And to prove a point to Leon about how great and well-known the studio is, she accepts. The next day, Alex and Violetta are talking about Leon in the park, and then he suddenly appears and Violetta throws a fit.
No sé cómo, pero voy a buscar la manera de ser feliz lejos de León.
Hola.
Hola. Justo tenés que aparecer vos. Justo mágicamente apareces. Y aparte me hablas así, de esa forma. Oh, hola. Yo no lo puedo. Vos sos un descarado, León. ¿Sabes qué fue lo mejor que me pasó en toda mi vida? Haber cortado con vos. Eso.
Leon later sends Roxy an e-chat saying that he was thinking about her, and Violetta struggles with the fact that he was thinking about Roxy and not her. The conversation leads to Violetta asking him if he's ever been in love, and then he says that they can meet in person and he'll tell her. Which in turn makes her upset that he's asking Roxy out. Especially considering the fact that they only broke up 10 days ago, which is the first thing that Violetta has said throughout this whole Roxy mess that has actually made sense to me. Moving on, Roxy and Fausta then go on to audition for Gregorio for their upcoming showcase, and somehow nobody is suspicious of them, even though they go on to sing their song Junto a Ti for it. Afterwards, Leon congratulates her for making it into the show, and she asks him if he's ever been in love again. And he says that he'll answer her if she goes out with him. So they go on to their date, where she's just constantly pressuring him to tell her if he's ever been in love before, and he's just not really giving an answer. All this leads to her getting upset, saying that she knows about his relationship with Violetta because of UMix.
Sé que has estado con Violeta de novio por mucho tiempo.
Pero ya no. Y no quiero hablar de eso ahorita.
¿Cómo que no? Si tu relación con Violeta ha sido la más importante en toda tu vida.
¿Quién te dijo eso?
¿Ya la has sacado de tu corazón, de tu mente? ¿Ya no piensas más en ella? ¿Qué? ¿Solamente porque discuten, porque pelean por eso?
Roxy,
¡cállate, León! ¿Qué vas a hacer ahora? ¿La vas a reemplazar por otra? ¿Qué más da? ¿Qué más da?
Now just imagine you go out on a date with somebody and then they start yelling at you over your ex. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't think I would want to see that person again, especially after a first date. Like, that's just insane. Leon, on the other hand, though, he decides to email her. So he says that he doesn't understand why she got so upset, and he hopes that he can see her soon so that they can talk about it. But now it's time to take a little bit of a Roxy break as we have another Leonetta plotline. The next day, Leon goes to Vilu asking for a truce, but then she just gets upset with him for lying about being with someone else. When, again, just like last season, he didn't technically lie. Even more so this time around because he had only met Roxy once after she had asked. Violetta then decides to invite Leon to her dad's celebration of love. It's basically like a wedding, but not an official wedding. But then he overhears him telling Jerry that he doesn't want to go. So she decides not to invite him before hearing the end of the sentence, which is that he doesn't want to go because he wasn't invited. Then we move on to the non-wedding wedding day, where Leon messages Roxy about his predicament. He admits that he wants to be there for her, but isn't sure that she wants him to be there. And so of course Violetta advises him to go. So he shows up and they talk in the kitchen, where Violetta basically tells him that he needs to choose between herself and Roxy. Then when they're dancing later, he admits to her that he now understands how she felt about him and Tomás.
No estoy seguro, pero lo que me pasa es por tu culpa.
¿Por mi culpa o porque también estás pensando en otra?
Lo peor de todo es que ahora entiendo lo que te pasaba con Tomás y conmigo. Estoy confundido.
Now, I personally feel like this should have been a huge wake-up call for Vilu. She has mentioned numerous times that she doesn't want to go through being torn between two guys again, and how hard that situation was for her. And now she is single-handedly making Leon go through that exact same thing. But at least she does have somewhat of a conscience, as we later see her talking to her friends about how Leon will never forgive her for this. Which, like, part of me does wish that that could have been the case. But nonetheless, she still goes on to test him in the next episode. She does this by calling him as Violetta, and then while they're talking, texting him as Roxy. And then once he replied to Roxy, she got upset with him, yelling at him for a bit before hanging up.
Y ahora tengo la certeza de que seguís sintiendo algo por mí. Yo sé que lo nuestro es y fue único. Y nadie te puede hacer olvidar lo que vivimos juntos. Y por ahí me equivoqué, pero siento que nunca vas a amar a nadie como me amas a mí.
And I don't know if I'm being dramatic or not, but there was just something about watching her talk to him as herself and be like all calm and whatever in her tone, but then text him at the same time as Roxy. Like, that whole thing just made me uncomfortable. The whole thing just felt so malicious, and the fact that she was doing it so carelessly just felt really telling, in my opinion. And I think just like the deep deceit and two-facedness of it all just really just does not sit right with me. And then to go on and get mad at him after when she's the one who put him in that situation, like, nuh-uh. I don't want anything to do with any of like what went on in that scene. Moving on, she asks him again to choose between the two of them the next day, and he says that he needs time. And then this brings us to the end of the episode where he tells Roxy that he chooses her. And then she gets mad at him, saying that he can't choose her.
Te escojo a ti.
No puedes elegirme a mí. Ni a Violeta. No sabes lo que quieres, León.
Sí, sí sé. Te veo a los ojos y no tengo dudas.
Entonces no me mires. No quiero que pase lo mismo que pasó con Lara. Empezaste a salir con ella y seguías pensando en Violeta. Si quieres olvidarte de Violeta, hazlo solo.
Now, I'm not really too sure why he's choosing the person where all they've done is fight. Or I guess I do know why, because all him and Violetta do is fight as well. This is just the norm for him at this point. Maybe it's his type, I don't know. Anyways, Roxy brings up Lara, saying that she doesn't want to be used like her as a way to forget about Violetta. This causes him to think that she talked to Vilu, because how else would she know any of that information? Which is like technically true, I guess, because she is Violetta, so I guess she has kind of in a way talked to herself. Then that night, Leon calls her and accuses her of this and says that he chooses Roxy. On to the next episode where we get this conversation where Leon tells Roxy that he wants to get to know her better. And guess what she does? That's right, she gets mad at him. This time it's for saying all of this close to Violetta's house. She's just like grasping at straws at this point. And then the two end up almost kissing. Because that's normal.
¿Cómo me vas a decir todo esto tan cerca de la casa de Violeta? Es que no lo entiendo. No lo entiendo.
No, yo tampoco entiendo, eso no tiene nada que ver. O sea, me refiero que estoy siendo honesto contigo, en serio. Dame una oportunidad de mostrarte que juntos podemos...
No puedo.
In the next episode, we have the showcase for the studio, and then this is where they almost kiss for the second time after Roxy trips and falls into his arms. And I think all of this, along with the nightmare she has that night about him finding out, causes her to realize that it's time for her to come clean. So she goes to his garage the next day, but when she says that she has to tell him something, he assumes that it's that he talked to Roxy about him. And there's also a very loud dog barking throughout this scene, and I'm not really too sure why. Like, I assumed this was all filmed on a soundstage, like, why the dog? What's the point of that?
Te escuché hablando con Angie y no sé qué hiciste o qué le dijiste a Roxy para alejarla de mí. Pero lo hiciste, felicidades.
No le dije nada a Roxy, León.
Violeta, deja de mentir,
No
¿ok?
te estoy...
Si según tú te querías acercar a mí, le estás haciendo lo contrario, ¿ok?
León, por favor, yo no...
¿Sabes qué? Vete.
Es que...
Quiero estar solo, ¿ok? Por favor.
She then tries again later as Roxy, but then decides to just say that she doesn't feel the same way and has come to say goodbye. Later, Violetta comes over again, but this time to ask for his help with the studio, but then he just gets upset with her because he thinks that she made Roxy leave, which I guess she kind of did. She tries again the next day, but this time with Fran and Cammy as well. And then this results in kind of a harsh moment where he tells Violetta that he knows that it must hurt that he loves someone more than he loved her, but she has to get over it.
Si yo no hice nada.
No hiciste nada.
No.
Mira, no quiero ser malando contigo ni nada. Pero yo estoy enamorado de Roxy y por tu culpa la perdí. Y entiendo que te duela mucho que yo llegue a querer a alguien más que a ti. Pero supéralo, ¿ok?
And like, listen, I know that he truly believes that it's her fault that Roxy left, but still, I feel like that was just like a bit much. Anyways, this brings us to episode 40, which means it's finally time for Leon to learn the truth. So Leon calls Fausta, aka Fran, and she gets Violetta to answer the phone as Roxy. So he makes her the proposition of them meeting for one last time, and if she still doesn't want to see him after that, then he'll stop. So she shows up to tell him the truth, but then he kisses her and finds out for himself.
Tenemos que aceptar lo que sentimos. Por eso viniste.
Necesito decirte algo, necesito que me escuches.
Violeta.
So now that Leon knows the truth, we see them the following day meet at the bench where they first kissed. Violetta gives this speech about how she loves him and how she did what she had to do so that she wouldn't lose him, but he says that it makes sense that they're both there because it's where everything started and it's where everything should end, which are honestly some very powerful words from Leon.
Yo tampoco creo las coincidencias. Y me da gusto que hayas venido. Porque aquí empezó todo, ¿no? Con ese beso. Y creo que lo mejor es que aquí termine. No te puedo perdonar.
And I think I should point out again that it has only been a day. I get that Violetta wants his forgiveness and all of that, but she's going to have to be patient. This amount of deceit isn't going to be forgiven in a day. But I guess now that Roxy's dead, it's time for our next chapter. So now that the Roxy secret is out, Jerry is concerned that Violetta is going to get in her way of her advances with Leon. So she goes on to use Violetta's name to cancel a meeting that his band had with a record label. Violetta then shows up at his garage right after this news is broken to him and the band, and Leon doesn't hesitate in accusing her. He then comes over later and again asks why she canceled the meeting. She says that she didn't, but he says that he doesn't believe her after the Roxy scandal, which in my opinion is honestly kind of fair. Then they go on to talk further about Roxy, with Leon explaining that he fell for her because Roxy wasn't her. And I understand that this is probably hard for Violetta to hear, but at the same time I do think that it is really important for her too. Just as a way of truly showing her what she took away from him, and emphasizing just how cruel what she did was. Because it really is so messed up that he thought he was moving on and just ended up right back where he started. And although everyone on the show is probably right in the fact that he did fall for her because she was Violetta underneath it all, pun intended, what Leon is saying here is also true. It wasn't just that she had all the same qualities as Violetta, it was that she had all of those, but at the same time she wasn't Violetta. She was someone he could start over with and start a new story with. And she took that away from him, which I do genuinely think is just so messed up.
Si te enamoraste de Roxy, es porque nunca dejaste de amarme.
No. Me enamoré de Roxy porque era una nueva persona con la que podía empezar una nueva historia. Me enamoré de Roxy porque no eras tú.
But now that the meeting cancellation plan was a success, Jerry moves on to the second stage of her plan, which is to make Violetta think that her and Leon are dating. So the next day, her and Alex plan for Violetta to see her and Leon together. And her plan works perfectly. She immediately thinks that they're dating, which I honestly shouldn't be surprised by because Violetta truly loves just jumping to conclusions. And so Jerry's plan continues. She answers Leon's phone when Vilu calls and even buys herself flowers and raves about a date that never happened. So this leads to Violetta eventually going to Leon and accusing him of dating Jerry. He of course denies this, and then Jerry comes in and denies it as well. A couple episodes later, Leon does find out that it was Jerry who canceled the meeting and not Violetta. But does he go and apologize to Violetta for thinking it was her? No, that's where the plotline ends. We do, however, get this one scene where Leon calls Violetta and she says, no, it's not Violetta, it's Roxy. So I guess we're role-playing now, however, Leon doesn't really seem too into this. But it's been a hot minute now, and so it's time for us to slowly get back onto the road of these two getting back together. Later at the studio, she asks him if they can get back together, and he doesn't answer her. But he later finds her in the park and says that he does want to be with her, he just can't.
Eres muy importante para mí.
Sí, pero soy parte de tu pasado. Y lo entiendo, y aunque me duela, lo acepto. Yo te amo.
And just when things were looking up again, it's time for some more conflict. So Violetta does one of those venting emails where she writes down everything she wishes she could say to Leon but doesn't send it. Germán then gets a hold of her laptop and of course he accidentally sends this email. This causes Leon to go to Violetta very upset and he tells her to forget about him. In the next episode she sends him an apology email and he deletes it without reading it, which is unfortunate because as we know, Violetta is pretty good at writing emails. Like, it's what saved their relationship in the first season, so this probably would have patched things up for them if he would have actually read it. We do have a pretty iconic moment in the next episode though, when Violetta is in the park and the wind carries off a photo of Leon and she runs after it. And then meanwhile, Germán finally is able to talk to Leon and explain that he sent the email. This causes Leon to apologize to Violetta and they both agree that they don't like arguing. But honestly, I'm not really too sure if I believe either of them at this point. Moving on, Violetta and Ludmilla then invite themselves in a way to this party at Leon's garage. While there, she overhears Leon asking who invited her, which causes her to leave. Then the next day, she asks him what happened because she thought that everything was fine between the two of them now. And he says that it is, but that he still wants some distance. This leads her to go on about how hard that is for her because she thinks about him all the time, but promises that she will try for his sake.
Apareces en todas partes, estoy sola y pienso en vos, estoy con mis amigas y pienso en vos y canto y pienso en vos y estás en todas partes. Y me enojo conmigo misma porque no quiero pensar en vos todo el tiempo, pero no puedo. Te juro que no puedo. Te prometo que lo voy a intentar.
And then I actually think it's this speech that ends up winning him back, because then we see him go to Andrés and tell him that she's part of his life and that he thinks about her all the time, and then Andrés tells him that it's time for him to get her back. And then this brings us to their next band rehearsal. Violetta goes, but then feels awkward and wants to leave, until Leon says that it doesn't bother him that she's there. He then asks her to talk with him outside, and right when he's about to ask if they can get back together, she says that she's decided that she needs to forget about him forever. And then later that day, Andrés tells her that Leon was going to ask her to get back together. So she calls him later that night to reconcile, but then Jenny is there and she takes Leon's phone and breaks it because she is actually insane. Anyways, somehow this causes Violetta to think that Leon is mad at her because I guess he didn't answer her call. But then this brings us to the band's DVD taping where everything changes, and so let's move on to our final chapter of this video, chapter 13. So at the DVD taping, Violetta finds out that his phone is actually broken and that he's not mad at her. Then both of their friend groups encourage them to go talk to one another, and it's a little bit awkward until Violetta admits that not letting him talk earlier was the biggest mistake of her life.
No te dejé hablar y cometí el peor error de toda mi vida.
Entonces, ¿estás segura?
Nunca estuve tan segura en toda mi vida.
Bueno, entonces, me alegra.
Sí, a mí también me alegra.
Mucho.
Violetta then sings and Leon joins in, even though he's not allowed to. And then at the end of the song, they kiss surrounded by bubbles, and it's very magical. Then that night, he comes over while she's playing underneath it all, and he joins in, which I completely forgot about, but I absolutely loved. Like, I feel like this song sounds so beautiful as a duet, and I absolutely loved this moment. They then go on to talk further about the kiss and agree to be just friends. And I personally really like this scene because Leon is like, novios? And she's like, no. And he's like, no, you're right. And I don't really know why they can't be novios right now, probably because it's only episode 61, but nonetheless, I really enjoy this interaction.
Entonces, ¿qué somos? ¿Novios otra vez?
No. No. ¿Qué somos?
Amigos, ¿no?
Claro. Sí, amigos.
And once again, we're nearing the end of the season, so it's time for another duet. In episode 62, we see both Violetta and Leon working on their new song, Abrázame y Verás. Then they both call each other and talk about the song they're composing and how happy they are to be on good terms once again. Moving on, the band's record label then decides to remove the Studio Kids songs from their DVD, and so Leon takes a stand and says, no Studio Kids songs, no band. Afterwards, Violetta asks what made him change his mindset about the studio, and he says that it was her. Then he admits that pushing the studio away was a way for him to distance himself from her. And now that they're friends, it's different. Which just makes no sense because he quit the studio while they were still together. That was actually the main reason why they broke up in this season, because he wanted to quit the studio and they kept arguing over the fact that she thought it was a bad idea. I don't know if you guys forgot about that, but I certainly didn't. But I guess at the end of the day, if it was the studio that tore them apart, it just only makes sense that it's the studio that would bring them back together again. The next day, Leon comes over to help her rehearse and they watch their performance from the DVD taping and then they almost kiss. So he comes over again later to talk about it and it's this really cute moment. They both agree that they feel a really strong connection with one another and think that maybe it'll go away with time. And I just gotta say, like, I love seeing these two be awkward with one another. It's such a nice change of pace and I just think it's adorable.
Cuando mirábamos el video, yo me sentía muy cerca tuyo. O sea, estábamos cerca porque estábamos sentados en el mismo, pero ¿me entendés lo que quiero decir en el sentido?
Sí, es justo lo que quería decir.
Sí.
Por ejemplo, estábamos viendo el video y tenía ganas de besarte.
Claro.
Y perdón, es algo que sentía y...
No, está todo bien.
¿Sabes? Me pasó eso.
A mí me pasa lo mismo.
The next day, they go on to have the same conversation about being just friends, but this time Vilu says that she never realized that their problem stemmed from lack of communication and jumping to conclusions, which is just so refreshing to hear one of them say that at least. On to our next big plot point, which involves Priscilla. She is Ludmila's mom and sort of married to Herman at the moment. And in episode 66, she pushes Violetta down the stairs. In like an attempted murder, basically. Or maybe not murder, but like assault at the very least. Violetta blames Ludmila because she was the last person that she saw, but then Leon is actually the one that suggests that it was Priscilla. Then when they find out that it was her, he accompanies her when she tells her dad. He also plays Amor del Aire for her to comfort her and goes to protect her when Priscilla comes home. And I know this whole situation doesn't really seem like a very romantic moment, but for me, I think that this is arguably one of the most important things Leon did for her throughout this whole series. It's just proof that he'll always be by her side to protect her no matter what, and it's just so sweet, it almost makes me want to cry, because I'm just a soft little baby. In other news, Jerry can't take the fact that she's losing, and so she decides to come up with one final plan. In this plan, her and Alex both steal the other person's tablet and then text the other person saying that they can't be friends anymore. Leon and Violetta both receive these messages and believe that they're real and decide to respect the other person's decision. Taking a little pit stop though, Ross Lynch is here now because apparently he's friends with Leon, and he tells Violetta that Leon called her special, which isn't really that relevant in the grand scheme of things, but when Ross Lynch comes onto the scene, like, you just have to talk about it. Violetta then comes up with the bright idea of establishing a record company through the studio and decides to sign Leon's band. This coming after they were dropped from their own record label for not wanting to cut the studio kids from their band's DVD. And so he goes to thank her for this, and then they share a moment where they almost kiss.
No sé cómo agradecerte lo que hiciste.
No me agradezcas nada, yo quería ayudarte. Porque tu felicidad es la mía.
Gracias a ti, voy a cumplir mi sueño.
Now we've got 10 episodes left, and so things are happening quite quickly. Alex gets revealed as actually being Clément. Now I didn't waste my time by talking about Alex earlier, but basically he's rich but his dad doesn't support him in pursuing music. And so he came up with this fake persona of Alex, and Violetta helped him get a scholarship. And so Violetta is now very hurt by this news because she feels as though she was deceived by him. Which I guess we're just gonna ignore the irony of in regards to the Roxy plotline. But Violetta doesn't see the hypocrisy in this at all, and she goes to Leon interrupting a band rehearsal by hugging him. And now it's time for a little season 2 throwback as we return to Detective Leon. So he overhears Clément tell Violetta that he loves her, and this causes him to confront Clément on why he always told him to distance himself from Violetta. And he also asks him what him and Jerry have been up to. But then Violetta shows up and this conversation goes nowhere. Then Leon tells Violetta that he thinks Clément is hiding something, but she doesn't believe him. A couple episodes later, Clément is at Violetta's and there's this funny moment where Leon comes in.
Hola, León. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Todo bien?
Bien, Olga me dejó pasar, pero creo que no es buen momento.
No, para, León, es que vine a agradecer a Violetta.
Sí, porque, bueno...
Te quiero agradecer a vos también. Bueno, nos vemos.
Chao, después hablamos,
I just love how he seemingly comes out of nowhere and goes right back to his jealous antics. But anyways, he initially came over to ask for her help in discovering what Clément is hiding. The next day, Violetta thinks that he was ignoring her during rehearsal, and so afterwards she goes to talk to him about this, but then they just end up arguing about Clément again. And then Leon puts on quite a funny show in my opinion, where he starts looking around wondering where Clément became relevant in their conversation.
Yo no quiero. ¿Sabes qué es lo que no escucho? Que no quiero que me hables todo el tiempo mal de Clément. Sí.
¿Qué?
Sí,
¿Clément?
eso.
¿Ves? No escuchas porque en qué momento, no sé en qué momento salió Clément.
Me estás diciendo que no te escucho, por eso te dije Clément.
Yo no veo a Clément aquí, no sé.
¿Qué?
Espérame, ¿Clément? Clément, ¿dónde estás? Clément, Alex, Tiburcio, como te llames. Yo no lo veo.
Gracioso, estás muy gracioso. ¿Y qué te pasa? Me estás tratando como una tonta, Leon.
And I know that they are arguing here, but I feel like you can tell that even themselves are tired of all of this at this point. Like, it's almost comical. But surprisingly enough, they're back on good terms by the end of this episode when we see them rehearse Abrázame y Verás together and almost kiss. We then get some more whiplash though, as we later see them go over some more choreo for their performance, and then they end up fighting once again. But all of these conflicts seem to fade away once they leave for Seville. This is where their final show is, as they just truly loved going to Spain in this final season. So they argue again a bit before leaving, but then end up sightseeing once they arrive. That night, Leon tells her that they can't be just friends. Then they argue over who asked for distance until they realize that someone else must have been involved here. Then, as if on cue, Jerry and Clément come and he admits to everything. But of course, there are numerous moments throughout this episode where Clément tried to confess and Jerry stopped him because she is truly one of the worst characters in this entire series. But all of this brings us to their iconic final moment. I can't believe we actually made it here. So Leon and Violetta go to the bridge, he says that they can't be just friends, and they kiss. So Violetta tells Leon that her heart beats his name and they promise that nothing will ever separate them again.
Que te amo, Violeta. Y te quiero prometer, en esta ciudad, en este mágico lugar, que te voy a amar para siempre.
Yo también.
Y por favor, hay que prometernos que jamás nos vamos a volver a separar.
Now, despite the fact that we all know that that is really not the case for these two, this is still just such a perfect scene. And honestly, I like living in the bliss where I believe that these two really are together forever. And you know what? I do think I could believe that these two ended up together after the show. Like, I feel like it's just so obvious that these two people have just such a desire for conflict that I could see that no other person would be able to satisfy them like the other person does. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that their relationship would be healthy or stable by any means, but I could get behind these two being like the true endgame just solely based on the fact that nobody else could ever match their toxicity. But the show's not over yet, and so then we have another somewhat iconic scene where we see the two of them go and buy a ring for Herman and Angie, but it's done so in a montage moment that definitely makes you question if it's for them or not. Later, there's a sweet moment where she tells him that he's the best thing that's ever happened to her. They also go on to perform their song on stage and kiss, of course. Then, during Herman and Angie's wedding, he accompanies her while Angie walks down the aisle, and they sing Nuestro Camino together as the ceremony ends as well. Now, it just didn't feel right to include the movie in one of these chapters, and so that leaves us with the epilogue. And in regards to the movie, I feel like you can either take it or leave it. I know some people view it as fan fiction and not canon, whereas other people, I do think, take it as canon. I personally haven't met any of them, but I'm sure there's people out there that take it as canon. Nonetheless, I feel like I have to talk about it. So it's a few years later, and Violetta and Leon are both established in their solo careers, and seemingly still together. Then Violetta comes to find out through the tabloids that Leon has been spending time with this other girl, Melanie, played by Sofia Carson. She tries to call him, but he's currently filming a music video, and so Melanie picks up the phone for him. She says that he's showering when he's not, and asks to take a message, causing Violetta to think that it's all true. She then goes on a talk show and they ask her about Leon's quote-unquote relationship with Melanie, and even show her a video of the two of them together with Melanie confirming their relationship. Then, due to all of this stress, she abruptly quits the music industry and her dad sends her to Italy to find herself again. Now, I know that this angered a lot of people and they were very confused as to how Violetta could do all of this after the events of the finale. But after making this video, I do think that being rash and delusional does align with Violetta's previous actions on the series. We already know that Violetta is quick to jump to conclusions, and to think that one moment on a bridge would solve everything in the relationship, I think would be a bit naive. Anyways, Ludmilla tells Leon what Melanie has been up to, and so he begs Herman to tell him where Violetta is. Leon and Ludmilla then travel to Italy together to tell Violetta the truth. And it is quite the journey. They go on a ferry meant for transporting farm animals, rent a Mini Cooper, and then Leon goes on to beg a man for his horse so that he can get to Violetta after their car breaks down. Unfortunately though, once he gets there, he sees her with another guy and then runs away. This, on the other hand, I don't think really aligns much with Leon from the show. The Leon we know and love probably would have interrupted that moment and put on a big scene of jealousy and in the end, win her back. But I can cut this Leon some slack here because maybe he was just genuinely tired and felt like he just wanted her to be happy. Then Ludmilla arrives and she tells Vilu that Leon came for her and that all of the rumors are fake. Violetta goes to the docks, but he's already left, and so she takes a sailboat out to try to get to him. But then the water is very choppy and she crashes into the rocks. Luckily, Leon could only make it to this island near where she crashed, and so he runs in and saves her from drowning. We see them hold on to each other at the shore, and she says that she's never felt for anyone how she feels for him. Possibly because she's only like 19 and never really dated anyone else like she's dated Leon, but I digress.
Perdón, te juro que no te quise herir.
No expliques nada. Yo nunca estuve enamorada de otra persona que no fuese vos. Te amo. Te amo.
So they go on to build a fire at this island and wait until Ludmilla and Benicio from Soy Luna come and save them. And that's the movie. They kiss before she goes on stage and he mouths Te amo as she's bowing. But that's really all we got from them in the movie, which honestly isn't even that much. We did also see the two of them together in the special episode that premiered after the finale, which you can watch on YouTube. It's basically just a quick flashback episode where they're all reminiscing at the studio and sing Ser Mejor together. But if you're still needing some more Leonetta in your life, you can also go watch their 10-year reunion special where they sang Podemos live for the first time again. There's also the live tours that they did, which I didn't talk about, but obviously they're also in that as well. Honestly, I feel like it's safe to say that out of all of the ships I've covered and probably will cover, these two are definitely not lacking when it comes to content. And so that wraps up my very long but very satisfying video. If you watched Violetta as a kid, please let me know down below how much of this you remember. And if you've never seen the show before and you actually watched this whole video, no matter how long it is, please let me know your thoughts on them. I am just so curious to know an outsider's opinion. And honestly, even though this video took me like a leg and a half to make, I am so happy that I did it. Because honestly, I doubt anyone else would. And I guess to summarize what I've just talked about for the past 2 hours, I think it's safe to say that this ship was toxic. They had some severe communication issues, but at the end of the day, their big romantic moments were a huge highlight in a lot of people's childhoods. You just can't deny how romantic him saving her time and time again was. And although unhealthy, Violetta's chaotic moments were pretty entertaining as well. And so yeah, that's it. That's my Leonetta video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below. I can't wait to read all about it. Anyways, Cater Tots, that is all I have to say for today. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you very, very soon. I cannot actually believe this video was done. Like, I know it's not. I still have this last chunk of the video to edit, like, after I am done filming. But the fact that this part is done is, like, a mind... like, it's messing with my mind. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna move on after this. Like, this has been such a big part of my life and, like, my daily work for so long. I don't even know. How do you move on? What is life like after Leonetta? I just don't know. I also hope that it wasn't too obvious that I filmed this video in 3 takes. But also, if it is, that's okay. I don't really care. But I more so care about the fact that I hope it's not too obvious how sick I sound in this last one, because I just got over a cold that was hell. I hated it. Please don't ask me to cover another novella ship for at least like 3 years, because this was a lot of work for me and I just need to like mentally prepare myself before I do it again. Or enough time has passed for me to forget about how much work it truly was. I'm gonna stop rambling. This video is long enough. I love you guys. Thank you so much for your love and support, and I can't wait to see you next month with my next love story that is going to be a third of the length of this one. All right. Bye guys. Love you.